Hey everyone, and welcome back to Who Cares. Had a long break from doing Doctor Who reflections, but now we're back with series one or season 27,
The
however you
fantastic season 27.
yeah, however you want to call it. Series one, season 27, the first series of the revived series of Doctor Who. It's not a reboot like some people say. It is a continuation of the show, but yeah, a very interesting.
A revitalization.
Yeah,
Yeah, RCD era 1.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's
Doctor Who returns at last.
yeah,
Yeah. Really returns this time.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
But
yeah.
yeah,
You want to mute
you want to
yourself,
mute yourself,
Alan?
Alan?
Bit of an echo there. Yeah, sorry about that. Um, yeah, but Doctor Who returned after a 16-year gap. There was the TV movie in '96, and I guess you could count Dimensions in Time if you want to, even though it's not canon. But yeah, a long time off our TV screens. And what's interesting was how the show actually came back. Russell T Davies, he was known before this for making drama series like Second Coming, and he also did Queer as Folk, and he's gone on to do other shows recently like It's a Sin, which won some TV awards. So he was a big Doctor Who fan, and he was talking at the time about Doctor Who to the BBC. I think he talked to Jane Tranto, who was pregnant at the time. He was at this party and he wanted to talk about Doctor Who, and he didn't think it was going to go anywhere. But thankfully, the BBC had changed a lot in 20 years since the 80s. Like back in the mid 80s with Michael Grade and Jonathan Powell. The BBC hated sci-fi and they hated Doctor Who. They found it embarrassing, and you know, times had changed. The BBC had realized that, Doctor Who was a classic show and people loved it. And there was a fan base still out there, even though the show hadn't been on air. There was the Big Finish audios in 1999. There was the Virgin Media novels. So there was a public interest. And on the 40th anniversary, 2003, they announced Doctor Who was coming back. They started filming in 2004, not with Paul McGann. They decided to get Christopher Eccleston, who would sadly only play the Doctor for one series. But Christopher Eccleston, who I think was a great choice because he was a well-known actor, established actor, and they got him in. They got Julie Gardner. They got Phil Collinson, and a whole plethora of great actors and directors. They got Billy Piper, who was a pop star at the time, which was kind of unusual as a companion Rose. And they wanted to bring a sort of modern, fresh take to Doctor Who, so there'd be a lot more emphasis on the companion this time. That's why the first episode is called Rose. So the first story, you really see it through the eyes of Rose. And yeah, I mean, this first episode, Rose, it saw Doctor Who return back to televised format for the first
I
time since
think you mean Rose.
yeah, Rose. Yeah. um it's the first time since 1989 that Doctor Who was back as a TV show. I mean, like I said, you had the TV movie, but this is the first time you had it made by the BBC again, not made by Fox or anything like that. It's a purely British production. Although this time, instead of filming it in England, they shifted over to Cardiff in Wales. That's where Doctor Who will be made from now on. But yeah, I mean, as for Rose, it's an interesting story because we have the first story with Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor, Billy Piper as Rose, and you also have a return of the classic Doctor Who aliens, the Autons, which first appeared in Spearhead from Space, and also appeared in Terror of the Autons with John Pertwee and Roger Delgado as the Master. But yeah, enough waffle from me. I'll hand over the mic to Alan and give us your thoughts on Rose, the first story of the new series of Doctor Who.
Okay. Doctor Who returns finally in 2005 with the story Rose and with not Paul McGann as the Eighth Doctor, but Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor. And apparently the decision was made, I guess, the reason why they didn't bring back Paul McGann, which I think they should have. I mean, it was only fair, but I guess they felt that too many years had passed since Paul McGann played the Doctor in that one TV movie. And I guess if they were going to start a brand new Doctor Who television series, it was best to start with a brand new, fresh Doctor. And the TV movie wasn't all that successful when it was broadcasted anyway. With all due respect to Paul McGann, it certainly wasn't his fault. So they decided to go, the new producer, Russell T Davies, decided to go with a brand new Doctor, the Ninth Doctor, and he cast Christopher Eccleston. And as far as how the Eighth Doctor regenerated into the Ninth, well, we would find that out much later on. They would finally reveal how that happened, but not for a while. All we know now is that the Doctor has regenerated again. And Christopher Eccleston, I always referred to him kind of as the punk Doctor because he's got a shaved head, he wears a leather jacket, he's decked out in black, black jeans, black shoes, he's got the black leather jacket. And he has kind of a punk look to him, but very talented actor, that's for sure. He's done a lot of work that I admire.
And might I add, the very first Northern Doctor.
Yes, the very first Northern Doctor.
Well, actually, technically, Paul McGann was the first Northern Doctor, but
Well, the first one with an accent, with a heavy, like Manchester accent.
Yeah. Which they actually addressed in the show. They told him, Doctor, you have a northern accent. Lots of people have a north. And they just left it at that. But yeah, the story Rose, I like it a lot. I don't think it's a perfect story, but I think overall, as the very first proper episode of Doctor Who since 1989, I mean, there was the TV movie, of course, with Paul McGann, but I mean, this is an actual episode of the story rather than a TV movie. For the most part, I think it's a lot of fun, and it's a wonderful way for the show to come back. And I also like the fact that Russell T Davies made the right decision on how to reintroduce the Doctor to audiences, which his predecessor, Philip Siegel, who produced the TV movie, did not get right, which is to gradually give the audience information about the Doctor, not throw all the information at you
Agreed.
In less than 90 minutes, which was way too much information in the TV movie. So all we know about the Doctor, especially if you are a brand new viewer, obviously the longtime fans know everything, but I mean the brand new viewers, and you're trying to bring in new viewers as well as the old, all you need to know is that the Doctor is an alien from another planet, and he travels around in a machine called a TARDIS, which is bigger on the inside than outside, and is shaped like a blue police box, and that's it. And also that there had been some sort of war involving the Doctor's people, the Time Lords, that the Doctor had taken part in, but things did not go well, and I think that's pretty much all the information you're given about the Doctor by the end of the story Rose. And more information about the Doctor will be revealed little by little by little as the episodes go on, and that's how you do it, to bring in the new viewers as well as satisfy the old longtime viewers. So that was a good approach. Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor, yeah, I think he's great. I mean, okay, we've never seen the Doctor wear a leather jacket before. He's never had a shaved head before, but he's never had the punk look before, kind of. But Eccleston wears it well, and I have to say he's instantly likable. And the Doctor that he reminds me of the most, really, is Tom Baker. Just the fact that Tom Baker had this big goofy grin. And Eccleston also has this big goofy grin, and whenever Eccleston flashes that goofy grin of his, I see Tom Baker in there. So that's like the Tom Baker personality coming out, even though Eccleston doesn't have the scarf, he doesn't have the jelly babies, he doesn't have K9, but I see Tom Baker's Doctor in him. in his personality. So he's very likable right from the word go. Very funny, very intelligent, and it's sad that he would only play the Doctor for one season. I mean, we'll get to that later on, like maybe when we do the second half of Eccleston's era. But it should be said right now that Eccleston was only under contract for just the one season because nobody knew if the new Doctor Who series would be a hit or not. Of course, it turned into a smash, but nobody knew for sure at the beginning. So Eccleston was only signed up for the one season. And he only did the one season, unfortunately. But for his one season as the Doctor, I thought he was great. And he is the Doctor that ushered back in Doctor Who. It wasn't David Tennant who did it. It was Christopher Eccleston. So never forget that. The story, Rose. Obviously, the fact that they brought back the Autons, who are classic Doctor Who aliens from the era of my favorite Doctor, the third Doctor, John Pertwee. So they brought back the Autons for another venture. I thought that was awesome. You immediately got my attention by bringing back the Autons, that's for sure. And of course, the episode is named after the brand new companion Rose Tyler, played by Billie Piper, former pop singer and now actress. I don't think she's doing the singing thing anymore. She's strictly an actress these days, I believe. And very good, very cute, very adorable, instantly likable. Sometimes her accent to me sounds a little thick. Occasionally, just on the rare occasions, it's a little difficult for me to understand what she says, but that's only rarely. For the most part, I can understand her. But like I said, instantly likable, very adorable, very cute, very charming. And again, she's got a beautiful smile and just this winning personality. And she and Eccleston have great chemistry. It's a shame it would only be just for the one season, but I thought that they made a really great pair together. And she's a wonderful companion for Eccleston. I also like the new approach in the story that we not only get to meet Rose, but we also get to meet her family and friends, although in this case it's just her mom. Let's see, what is her mother's name? Jackie Tyler, sorry. Who is, she's quite likable herself. She's a single mom. We find out that Rose's dad had died in an accident, car accident, years ago when Rose was just a baby. But I like Jackie a lot. She's quite funny, and just being a single mom trying to raise her daughter. She's quite good. Let's see. We also get to meet Rose's boyfriend. Oh God, I'm sorry, guys. What's the name of her boyfriend? I'm sorry. Rose's boyfriend? What's his name? Help me, somebody. I don't remember his name.
Mickey.
Mickey, thank you, Mickey. Yeah, Mickey. We get to meet her boyfriend, Mickey, played by Noel Clarke. Yeah, he's quite good as well. And he'll be a part-time companion because he'll enjoy them. He'll join them on some adventures. So he's quite good. The story mixes a lot of comedy, I guess, as we're trying to get to know the Doctor, and the Doctor's, Eccleston's Doctor is very quirky, that's for sure. He's a very, very quirky Doctor, very funny, but still, we can clearly see the intelligence of him, and it's also, I also like the fact that the show has a whole new look to it, because it looks like they went back to shooting it all on film, or at least what looks like film. I mean, maybe they were using digital cameras, but it looks like film to me. Whereas back in the classic Doctor Who series, starting with Colin Baker's final season, everything was being shot on videotape, which kind of gave the show a real cheap look to it. But now they seem to be shooting it properly on film, which was a good move.
Sorry to correct you, Alan. They were still shooting on videotape.
Sorry?
No, I didn't mean to cut in, but they were actually still shooting it on videotape with the new series. Just a better video tape.
Maybe they did a transfer on it because it doesn't have that squeaky clean sheen that videotape has.
Yeah, but
it's like it is between videotape and film. the new
Yeah,
look of the show.
but it was still shot in standard definition, and film can be transferred to high definition. But yeah, it was better cameras, obviously, in the year since the classic series ended. But yeah,
Yeah, okay. Well, but I do like the new look of the show, definitely. It looks very good, very modern. I like that. The visual effects on the show are quite good, even though some of the CGI, looking at it now, 17 years later, the CGI, some of it may look a little dated, but overall, it has a great look to it. And the visual effects are quite good. Some of the music in this story gets a little annoying. I mean, I think there's a little too much music in this particular story. Every time when we see the characters running, they have to play that, and we hear that quite a lot in the story Rose. So that kind of got on my nerves after a while. But it's a minor quibble, I suppose. And I still think it's scary when the Autons begin their attack. And once again, as a callback to the Jon Pertwee era, we see some of the Autons as window shop dummies, breaking the glass in the window shops and coming through the glass to attack people and to kill them with those little guns at the end of their hands. The fingers fold down and a gun barrel comes out and they can kill you with that. That's still scary. I think that's pretty much the main gist of Rose. Again, I don't think it's perfect. But again, this is the introductory story. They have to set up the Doctor, and they have to set up the whole Doctor Who series again. Again, some of the music score gets a little bit on the nerves with that constant needed music in this story. But overall, I think this is a great debut for the new Doctor Who series, and debut for Christopher Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor. And welcome back, Doctor Who. It's been such a long time, since we had the TV movie, and it took a long time for the BBC to finally come around again and say, okay, we'll give Doctor Who another shot. And they gave the job to Russell T Davies, and wow, he did a wonderful job. So welcome back, Doctor Who. Welcome aboard, Christopher Eccleston. It'll only be for one season, but he'll make the most of it. Welcome aboard, Billie Piper as Rose Tyler, and Doctor Who is back. So I think it's a highly enjoyable debut story for the new Doctor Who series, and Eccleston is the Ninth Doctor. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I'll give Rose a 8 out of 10.
Thanks, Alan. And now we'll move on to Ollie. Your thoughts on Rose? You there, Ollie? Ollie? Hello? I'll have to message Ollie. Seems like he's wandered off. Ollie?
Oh,
Yes.
there he is.
Hello?
Hey, you're next.
Sorry, I just had a phone call. So Rose, the very first story of the new series of Doctor Who. Yay! So this was not the first story I watched when I was younger. We'll get to that later. But obviously, it's the first series of the show, and I did obviously eventually, when I got into the show, go back and watch the entire series. And and as a debut for the new series, and as a debut for Christopher Eccleston, this is a really strong story. It isn't perfect for sure, but it gives you pretty much enough of a taster as to what the rest of the show is going to be like. And for me, it's pretty damn good as far as I'm concerned. Oh, fuck's sake, sorry. Right. So sorry about that. So I really like this story, and I think Christopher Eccleston is a great Doctor. I mean, he's the first Doctor I ever came across, to be honest. I think it's a good start. It's interesting to have a Doctor who looks different. He's not the typical person you would cast in this role, and I think that that's what kind of makes it interesting, is the fact that he's a guy from up north. He's from Manchester, but he doesn't look like the typical Doctor, but there's a reason for that. They're not just being different for the sake of it. It's literally, it's pretty much resembles his persona. The fact that he is kind of rugged and kind of dark, kind of bruised and battered after the Time War, and the fact that he's got this kind of new body and he's northern now, and it all kind of works in a weird, strange way. He still feels very much like the Doctor, like an alien, but you can see that he's been kind of tortured. Like when he talks about the turn of the Earth and stuff, and he's like, and that's who I am. Now forget me, Rose Tyler. Go home. And Eccleston gives a great performance, so dramatic, and you can tell why he was interested in playing the role, because he wanted to do something different with it. And I think Russell found a way to kind of give the backstory of the Time War to kind of fuel his series on, and so it kind of bridges the gap between Paul McGann and Christopher Eccleston. Although, as Alan said, the regeneration hasn't really happened yet. We'll get that later on in the new series in a weird way. But this story, it's pretty basic, it's pretty fine. My only real criticism of the story was that the climax was kind of resolved a bit quickly when the Doctor was trying to reason with the Nestene consciousness, and literally all the Doctor has to do is throw this anti-plastic at the thing, and that's how it is defeated. Where the hell did he get it? How did he make it? It's not really explained. It's just kind of this plot device that's kind of thrown in just to resolve that part. But I understand that this was the introductory episode. They didn't want to make the plot that was too complicated, but I don't know, it was just a little too convenient for me. But aside from that, it's a great story, and I love Murray Gold's soundtrack. Murray Gold is my favorite Doctor Who composer. I'm sorry, controversial, but I grew up with this era of the show, so yeah, this music is more memorable to me than some of the other music. But I do like the classic music, don't get me wrong, but to me this is my Doctor Who, and it's great. He really injects a lot of energy into this show, and also it's quite emotional as well. Like when we get to know Rose as a character, Rose Tyler, this is kind of I think the first time in a very long time where we've seen a companion and their family life. I don't think we've seen that very much in the classic series, so it's quite nice to see. Russell obviously decided to kind of make Rose the kind of audience character. Really, we're kind of told the story. We're introduced to the Doctor through her eyes. Yes, Rose is an interesting character. I mean, okay, as the series goes on, we'll discover a bit more about her persona and how emotional she is, quote unquote. But I think in this first story, she's pretty good, and it's a good introduction. And I like her home life. The fact that she's this 19-year-old girl who's kind of just gets up, goes to work, eats chips, and that's kind of it. She doesn't have much of an exciting life, and she's definitely looking for something more in life. And when she meets the Doctor, she's kind of well, taken aback by the whole thing, but in a weird way, she kind of loves it. I do think it's a bit of a bitch move though when she leaves Mickey at the end. It's just like when she says thanks, and he goes, for what exactly? She just kisses him and runs in the TARDIS. What the hell? That was just a bit weird. But Billie Piper's good, and I like kind of the thread of the story, how she's trying to discover more about the Doctor. When she goes to that conspiracy theorist Clive, I think his name is, who actually sadly gets killed later in the story by an Auton. And actually the Autons are back after a long time, which is nice. I mean, they're pretty good. I mean, they might be considered a bit camp in the sort of modern day, but I think that for this story they work. And for the basic narrative that this story is, it works fine. And I think they are pretty good. The other characters in this are really good. We have Camille Coduri as Jackie, Rose's mum. We don't often have like companions' families in the show, as I've mentioned. So Camille Coduri as Jackie is funny, especially when she's trying to flirt with the Doctor. She's like, "There's a strange man in my bedroom." "Yeah, there is. I'm in my dressing gown." "Yes, you are. Anything could happen." No. I like that. Yeah, I think as we go on, that becomes more of a theme to Jackie's character. She becomes, we discover she's actually quite lonely, because later on in the series we will discover that Rose doesn't have a dad. We'll get to that in part 2 of the reflection. But yeah, also we have Mickey Smith, played by Noel Clarke. I like him very much. I mean, he actually technically plays two characters in this. He plays Rose's boyfriend, Mickey, who's kind of an idiot. He's not really educated, but he's a nice guy. We find out that Mickey's a good guy. And as the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who progresses, Mickey will get further character development, especially into the David Tennant era. But yeah, he's good with Eccleston. I mean, Eccleston kind of winds him up. He calls him Ricky and all of that. And Mickey gets chucked into the bin. Yeah, which is quite funny. I must admit, the CG is kind of amusing, and it is kind of dated. But to be fair, for 2005, it's not bad, and it's kind of cool to see. Mickey gets thrown in the bin, and then there's a plastic copy that's made of him, and he goes into the restaurant and starts attacking people. That is quite a funny scene, especially the way it's edited when he goes, babe, sugar, babe, sugar. Some of the humor in this story is so camp, but I think it is trying to be reflective of some of the earlier Doctor Who stories. It's tried to appease that tone, and it's definitely tried to appease the original fans of the show, but it's just tried to revitalize it in a more modern time period. And again, this is not the most impressive story of the new series, but it is a good start, a very good start. There's also some great moments of bickering and banter with the Doctor and Rose, like when they meet each other. She's like, what? Who are you? And he's like, I'm the Doctor. Hello. And he's like, what do you lot do? You get up, go home, eat chips, go to bed. Bob's your uncle. I travel the world, and all of that. And the scene where they step out the TARDIS, he's like, look for that big transmitter, right in the heart of London. And he's standing in front of the London Eye, and Rose is trying to point to it. And he's like, what? What is it? What? Oh, fantastic. And obviously that phrase, fantastic, will become Eccleston's catchphrase, really. And Eccleston, as the Doctor, has that moment where he is confronting the Nestene consciousness, and he's saying like, I am talking, and he's trying to reason with it, saying that you need to leave the Earth and all of that. But that's all really good. Again, this is a basic story. It's not complicated, but it's a good start, and it's really damn entertaining, and it's quite funny. It's very well written by Russell T Davies. Some kind of odd moments in there, but not too many. And also the opening titles and the music are really good. Bit different as well, because we don't have the actors' faces in it. We just have the name, the title cards come up. But I do like the vortex effects quite a lot, and I think it was a great start to what would be 5 years of golden Doctor Who television. So yeah, despite my reservations, I'm going to give this one. I am going to give it 9 out of 10. So a fantastic beginning to Christopher Eccleston's one series, because this will be his only series. So make the most of it, fellas.
Cheers, Ollie, and thanks for that. Well, do you want to come with me? Because if you do, then I should warn you. You're going to see all sorts of things. Ghosts from the past, aliens from the future, the day the Earth died in a ball of flame. Yeah, that was the trailer, Trip of a Lifetime. Yeah, Rose, the first episode of the new series of Doctor Who Series 1 or Season 27, however you want to call it. Well, Rose, I think this is a fantastic Doctor Who story. Eccleston, for me, has a very...
No pun intended.
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And you know what? So was this episode. Eccleston, I think, has a special... Yeah, I think Eccleston has a special place for me and Ollie, because he was our first Doctor. Like, I guess you could say Eccleston was sort of the William Hartnell of the new series, as in he was the first Doctor that many kids of a new generation were introduced to in Series 1. This wasn't the first episode of Series 1 that I watched. I tuned in much later. But Eccleston, really, I think he's one of the most underrated Doctors. Some people dismiss him because he only did one series, and there are some people who don't really care for his Doctor. But Eccleston, I think, is, for me, one of the most underrated, and I think out of all the Doctors, he's definitely one of the best actors, just in general. I mean, he's a powerful actor in anything that I've seen him in. That he was in Our Friends in the North before this. He was in Let Him Have It. He was a well-known British actor on film and TV, and after Doctor Who, he would go on to have a big career in film and TV as well. So I think he was an inspired choice for the Ninth Doctor. He was a great choice for the Doctor to, to reintroduce the character to a new audience, a new generation who didn't grow up watching Doctor Who in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. And I think he was an inspired choice. And yeah, for me and Ollie and kids of my generation who started watching with, the new series in 2005, he is their doctor and he's my doctor. He was my first doctor. Me and Ollie, we started watching Doctor Who with Eccleston as the doctor. So, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, Russell T Davies, I'm so glad he brought the show back in many ways. Maybe you could question some of the stuff that came later on after he'd left, but he did a great job reintroducing the show to television, because I think a lot of people who were sitting down to watch this first time, they didn't know if it was going to work or not, because Doctor Who, it ended in 1989. It kind of had its day as a program. It had 26 years on the TV, and you had one, TV movie of Paul McGann, which, did well in the UK, but in America completely flopped in the ratings. So it looked like Doctor Who was dead, and bringing it back, so many years later, 16 years later, was it going to work? And I think Russell went to, he showed that it could work. He showed that the program still had life in it. And what I think is so great about Rose is how refreshing it is. I mean, I remember the first time I watched this story. Um, I remember I was in B&Q years ago with my brother, and I said to one of the guys behind the desk I was a Doctor Who fan, and he passed me a copy of Rose on DVD, the ones that used to get in a newspaper. And I remember going home and watching it, and I thought it was amazing. And I think Rose is a very underrated story. I have seen a lot of people say Rose just isn't that good, or it's not really essential viewing or anything. But I think it's a great story. I mean, the BBC, on the strength of this story alone, they immediately commissioned a second series of Doctor Who, and Barry Letts and Terrence Dicks, when they saw this, they were very impressed, and they thought it was much better than the TV movie, which they weren't too keen on. And I mean, there's a lot of hype before this, story came out. I mean, I don't remember the hype because I wasn't a Doctor Who fan back in 2005. I was a Star Wars fan. That was during the time of Revenge of the Sith. But I mean, there was a lot of hype, a lot of press hype, because you had Billy Piper, who was, a pop star, and Christopher Eccleston, who was a renowned actor in film and TV in Britain. And I mean, Eccleston, his outfit, that leather jacket and that jumper that he wears. I know there's been a lot of Doctor Who fans who criticize it and say, it looks too normal. Like the Doctor looks too normal in that outfit, like a bloke that you'd see on the street. But I think it works for Eccleston's Doctor, because Eccleston himself, he's from Manchester, he's from Salford, he's from a very working class background in the north of England, and I don't think he would have suited a more eccentric outfit like Paul McGann. Like, you couldn't imagine him wearing a scarf and a coat or something like Colin Baker would have worn. But I think Eccleston just nails it, straight away as a Doctor. I mean, I love the beginning of Rose. You got that new theme tune by Murray Gold, which I think is great. It's like a mixture of the old theme and like a new arrangement of the theme. When they leaked this episode online in 2005, they had the original Doctor Who theme, which was recomposed by Mark Ayres, and they weren't going to use that until they got Murray Gold to do the music, and he does a great job. And I love that title sequence, that CGI title sequence of the TARDIS in the blue vortex, and it's going into the red vortex, and you got the name Eccleston and Billy Piper and the logo. I think it still holds up pretty well now, like 17 years later. It's still a very good title sequence. And the way the story begins, I think, is great. That zoom in on planet Earth, and then you have Rose waking up at 7 a.m. And then we see afterwards that she goes off, and she's, I think she's working in Harrods, is it, or something like that. that's interesting. You see that she's working in this clothes department, and we see that she's got this boyfriend Mickey, and we have this interesting montage of her life. Like we see that she kind of has a little bit of a mundane life. I mean, nonetheless, she's still, um, she's still kind of enjoying her life, even though it's kind of mundane. She gets up to work every day, and she sees her boyfriend Mickey, and I just think the beginning of the story is great because you have that beginning where it really sets up the story and who this character is, and you think a Doctor Who story and focus on a doctor straight away, but that's the thing. Russell, he was very conscious when he was making series one to put a lot more emphasis on the companion. That's why, like I said, the episode's called Rose. It's really following her, and you're following, her perspective and the whole thing. But that beginning's great where they're closing up and she's given this money to give to the guy downstairs, and it's very creepy, that whole basement. And then you see the Autons come to life, and she thinks it's a bunch of students dressed up as shop window dummies. And the Autons here, they look great. I mean, they really do come across as living plastic. I mean, I think I find the ones from Spare from Space probably the scariest Autons, but these ones, they actually do look like living plastic, and they're about to kill her. And then I love the bit with Eccleston where he takes her hand and he says, "Run!" And they go off, and we see that one of the Autons, the Doctor gets in the lift and he rips its arm off. And I like the bit afterwards where we said Rose is saying, "Oh, it was students," and he says, "Oh, why would it be students?" And she said, "Oh, to get that many people dressed up and acting stupid, it's got to be students." And he says, "Oh, good guess." And she says, "Oh, was I right?" And he's like, "Yeah, they're not students." That made me laugh. So, yeah, the humor here works very well. And I think Eccleston is just very commanding as a doctor. I like the bit afterwards where he says, "Oh, go home and have your lovely beans on toast. Oh, I didn't catch your name, by the way. I'm the doctor. What's yours?" And she says, "Rose. So nice to meet you, Rose. Run for your life." That's great. And then we see that she's watching as the department store blows up, and then we see that she runs off, and you see the TARDIS in the background, and you hear a little bit of the Doctor Who theme. That's great. And I think the characters here are all really well developed. Like the character of Mickey, played by Noel Clarke. I mean, it's a real shame all that stuff came out about Noel Clarke recently in the last year or so, because I always really liked him as an actor, and I thought he was great as Mickey, or Mickey the Idiot, or as the Doctor calls him, Ricky. It's a real shame all that stuff came up about him last year, that he was like a sexual predator or whatever. But um, nonetheless, despite that, I really like the character of Mickey. Maybe not Noel Clarke. I think like my respect for him has really fallen recently because of all that stuff. But I do think the character of Mickey is written well, and there's that funny bit where he's watching the telly, and he gets the arm of the shop window dummy and he throws it in the bin, and then we see it comes back to the apartment. And I love all that stuff with the Doctor where he's got a Sonic and he's looking for the cat flap, and he says, "Oh," he says to Rose, "Oh, you're not made of plastic." That was quite funny. And we see that Jackie is there, and Camille Codroy, or Codry, however you pronounce her surname, she's very good as Jackie Tyler. She's a very funny character, and as Ollie said earlier, there's that very funny moment where he's talking to Jackie, and she says, "Oh, there's a strange man in my bedroom." "Yes, there is." "Well, anything could happen." No. I mean, that was very funny. And I like the stuff with the Doctor here. I mean, you can't tell that Christopher Eccleston recently, like the eighth Doctor, like must have regenerated um soon after, because he looks in the mirror and he says, "Oh, look at me ears." So I mean, that references the fact that he recently regenerated, and we would find out later on in Day of the Doctor, the War Doctor, he regenerates into the Ninth Doctor after that story. So it's his first story as a new Doctor. But there's just some great dialogue. Like I like the bit where Rose is in the she's in the kitchen making a cup of tea, and he reads the magazine and he says, "Oh, that's not going to work out. He's gay and she's an alien." I mean, that was very funny. And the bit afterwards where the arm attacks him, and Rose thinks that he's kidding about, and then it attacks her, and he manages to stop it with the sonic screwdriver. I think all that's great, and yeah, I mean, I just think the direction here is very good. I love that whole scene afterwards where Rose goes after the doctor, and Rose says, "Oh, you just can't swan off," and he's like, "This is me swanning off. See ya." And you have it all in one take where the camera follows Christopher Eccleston as a doctor and Billy Piper as Rose, and he essentially says, "Oh, all you lot do is you go to bed, eat chips, and go to work, and that's it. And all the time around you, there's a war going on." And I like the bit afterwards where she says Doctor What instead of Doctor Who. That was kind of nice. And then she says, "No, really, Doctor, tell me, who are you?" And I love the bit afterwards where Eccleston, he gives that speech, and he says, "Can you feel it? The ground beneath us, it's turning at a million miles an hour," something like that. I can't quite remember everything that he says. And he says, "Everything looks like it's standing still." And then he says, "Oh, that's who I am. Now forget me, Rose Tyler. Go home." There's that great mystery about the Doctor as well that we haven't seen in a long time. He goes off to the TARDIS, and you're wondering, who is this guy? And I love all the stuff as well with Rose and Clive. Like, we see that she goes off to Mickey's apartment, and she puts into Google, like, Doctor Blue Box, and she finds a picture of the Doctor during the JFK assassination. He was in the background, and she contacts this guy Clive. He's got information on the Doctor, and it's a great scene. Like, we see that Mickey saying, "Oh, we could be some creep on the internet, some psycho." And the actor who plays him, he's a famous actor. He does a very good job, and we see that he's a normal guy. Like, he's got a family, he's got a son. So I mean, that's interesting. And we see that he has, he goes into the shed, and he's got all this information that he shows that the Doctor was talking to the Daniels family of Southampton, and he managed to get them to avoid going on the Titanic before it sank. And there's a drawing of him during a volcanic explosion a couple hundred years ago, and there's a picture of him in the background of JFK, and he thinks the Doctor's a name that's handed down to different sons or relatives because of all the different Doctors we've had. But we just see Eccleston's Doctor in the Rose novelization that Russell did. Apparently, like, you saw the Doctor as like a disabled person in a wheelchair, which doesn't make any sense because Rose doesn't know about regeneration at that point. So that's kind of a error in the novelization. But yeah, I mean, we have some interesting stuff there, and Rose just thinks that he's a loon. And yeah, I mean, we do have some dated CGI now. I mean, yeah, the CGI is going to age. I mean, this did come out nearly 20 years ago, 17 years ago, which is kind of hard to believe. But yeah, there's that scene with the bin where Mickey sees that bin, and his fingers get stuck in the plastic, and he gets swallowed up by the bin. And then there's that Auton replacement. I mean, one thing I will say is, like, how did Rose not notice that that was an Auton replacement? I mean, his haircut, his skin, I mean, the way he acts. I mean, it's quite obviously not Mickey, but nonetheless, there's some funny dialogue there where she's like, "Oh, what do you want, pizza or Chinese?" He's like, "Oh, pizza." And she's like, "Or Chinese?" And he's like, "Pizza," which is quite funny. But yeah, all the stuff with the Doctor's great. We see that Rose talking to Mickey in the restaurant, and he wants information on the Doctor, and then you have that great moment where Eccleston arrives at the table, and he says, "Oh, a toast to a happy couple," and he pops the cork, and he spits it out, and then his hands turn into these giant, like these giant, like smashing blocks or whatever, and the Doctor rips his head off. And I love the bit afterwards where he says, "Oh, don't think that's going to stop me." And you have that scene where Rose and the Doctor gets in the TARDIS, and she goes into the TARDIS, and then she sees the inside, and she walks out, and she looks all around her, and then she goes back in, and she realizes that the TARDIS is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And I do quite like that TARDIS interior. It'll stay until the end of the Russell T Davies era. That sort of coral. I mean, I think it looks better when they dim the lighting, and yeah, it's very impressive. And she says, "Doctor, you're an alien, aren't you?" And he says, "Yeah." And we see that she starts, complaining to the doctor, and she says, "Oh, Mickey's head is melting," and she thinks Mickey's dead, and then he lands the TARDIS, and then she says, "Why is it a police public call box?" And he says, "Oh yeah, it's a disguise from the 1950s." And then we have a great bit afterwards where um, he's talking about people on the earth like stupid apes and all, and she says, "Oh, if you're an alien, how come you sound like you're from the north?" And then the doctor says, "Oh, lots of planets have a north." I mean, that was quite funny. It doesn't really make much sense. I mean, I don't know how um he got a northern English accent, but nonetheless I thought that was funny. And I like the bit afterwards where he's got the anti-plastic, and then he's saying, "Oh, we need to find the Autons." They got this big dish, and then she's saying, "What is it? What?" And then he looks behind him and he realizes the London Eye, and he says, "Oh, fantastic," which will be Eccleston's catchphrase. And you see them running throughout London, and then they go into the sewer or whatever it is, and then we see the nesting consciousness. Yeah, the CGI for the nesting consciousness, that hasn't aged that well, but I think it's interesting because this is set after the Time War, and we find out that most of the Nestines, their planets were destroyed in the Time War, and the Doctor says, "Oh, I'm addressing the Nestine," and he's trying to bargain with it, and it takes out the anti-plastic. It realizes what he's trying to do, and all that stuff in the shopping center is pretty interesting. Where you got Jackie on the phone to Rose, and we see that the Autons are coming to life and they're causing all this chaos. We see that Clive, unfortunately, he gets killed, and you actually see the Autons smash the windows this time and come through. They couldn't afford that in Spare from Space. And yeah, we see Jackie nearly gets killed at one point. These Autons, they confront her, and they're about to shoot her. And that's a great moment. And then we see that Rose, she says, "Oh, I got the gymnastics at school. I got the bronze." And she manages to save the Doctor. I thought that was really good. And you see that Mickey's okay. And then afterwards, we see the Doctor and Rose and Mickey. They get off in the TARDIS, and the Nestine's destroyed with the anti-plastic. And I really like the end of the story where we see that Jackie calls up Rose. Although I think it was a bit stupid of Rose just to hang up on her mother. It was a little bit mean, if I'm being honest. But I like the bit afterwards where she's with the Doctor, and the Doctor says, "Oh, do you want to come with me? You can stay here and eat chips and go to work and go to sleep, or you can come with me." And then she's like, "Oh, is it always dangerous?" And he says, "Yeah." And then she says, "No, I got to stay here." And you think that would be it? You think after her saying no, the Doctor would just go off, and then he comes back 5 seconds later, and he says, "Oh, did I mention it also travels in time?" And then she says to Mickey, thanks." And he says, "Oh, thanks for what?" And she says, "Exactly," which is quite harsh, to be honest. And Rose, throughout series one and into series two, she treats Mickey like shit, to be honest. But I like the bit afterwards where she goes into the TARDIS, and that's the end of the story. So yeah, Rose, I mean, yeah, we spent a lot of time talking about this, nearly 50 minutes talking about this first story. We won't spend as much time on the next four stories. But I mean, yeah, I think it's a great story. I think Eccleston is great as a Doctor. I think Billy Piper is excellent as Rose. I really like Mickey as well. Noel Clark, it's a shame all that stuff came out about him recently. But the soundtrack's great by Murray Gold. I still prefer Dudley Simpson, but Murray Gold has done a great job. Love the new title sequence. And thank you, Russell T Davies, for bringing back Doctor Who, because if he didn't bring back Doctor Who in 2005, then I may not have ended up being a fan of this show. It was only really by watching series one and starting there with Eccleston as the Doctor that I became a big fan of the show and got into the classic series. So I will always have to thank Russell for that, and Christopher Eccleston for being the Doctor. And as a story, I really have no flaws with it. I think it's a great story to kick off the new series. And I'm going to close off by giving Rose a 10 out of 10. So, yeah, now we move on to the next story in series one, The End of the World. Yeah. The second story in Doctor Who series one, or season 27, whatever you want to call it. And I'll hand it over to Alan now. Give us your thoughts on The End of the World. Alan? Yep.
I'm here. Yes, The End of the World. And yes, we will try to go a little quicker, as we spent a lot of time talking on that first story. But yes, The End of the World. I love this story. I totally love this story. This is definitely one of my favorites from Christopher Eccleston's era, from his one season as the Doctor. But I think this is one of his best. I totally love this story, always have. Yeah, what a neat concept. The Doctor takes Rose into space for the first time, but he takes her to the very last day of the planet Earth. Billions of years into the future, there's a space station, a highly advanced space station with a highly advanced force field surrounding it that can actually withstand an explosion of a planet, like literally right next to it. But the force field, billions of years from now, the technology from billions of years in the future is strong enough to protect this space station from the explosion. Basically, yes, the planet Earth is on its last day, literally its last day. The entire human race that is still alive around this time, they've already left the planet because the planet is no longer suitable for human life, and they've moved on. The Doctor makes sure to tell Rose that there are no more humans living on the planet. But you have a group of aliens who are monitoring the explosion that's about to happen of the planet on this space station with the highly advanced technology and the highly advanced force field. And it turns out there's some sort of saboteur on board the space station. And it's a really neat concept. It really is. I mean, it definitely reminds me that, this planet of ours, as the Doctor points out, this planet of ours may be around for billions of years, and that's a mighty long time, but the day will come when it's gone, when the sun in the sky swells up to a big red giant, and the planets die, or at least the planets that are closest to the sun will die, and yes, that includes the planet Earth. So I really love the intriguing concept of the Doctor taking Rose to the last day of planet Earth. And, Rose initially asks him, aren't you going to save the planet? And the Doctor tells Rose, nope, I'm not saving it. It's the last day. Time's up, And so basically it focuses on their adventure on the space station, the fact that everybody on board the space station is threatened because somebody has knocked out the force field. So when the Earth goes boom, the space station will be vaporized. So that's your adventure for this story. But it's a really intriguing adventure, really intriguing concept, and very thought-provoking Doctor Who story. That's one of the things that I love about this story. And the idea of what the aliens billions of years from now would be like, what the technology billions of years from now could be like. So I really, really loved it. And I love the design of the space station. I also couldn't help but notice that the space station seems to be in the shape of a cross, of a crucifix. So there might even be some sort of religious aspect to this story if you think about it. I mean, it's underplayed, but it's there. I think just the fact that the station is shaped like a cross, and the Earth is about to go boom. Yeah, and I love the designs of the aliens in this story, all the various different aliens that we see on board the station. I think the space station sets are terrific as well. The CGI work on this story is great. I love the robotic spiders that we see on board the station that are causing quite a bit of havoc. With I guess the infrared red eye that they can see with, but these metallic robotic spiders that we see. I mean, it's all CGI really, apart from a few model shots, I guess. But for the most part, it's CGI, but very impressive. And of course, this is also the story where we are introduced to the character of Cassandra, played by Zoe Wanamaker. who primarily does the voice of Cassandra. Cassandra is pretty obviously a CGI creation where we're told she's the last surviving human, but all she is now is a sheet of skin strapped to a frame with a mouth and a pair of eyes. And we see on her like these little veins of blood that pulsate very faintly. But you got to wonder, how can she possibly be alive? Because she's just, as Rose herself points out to Cassandra, you just skin, Cassandra. You just skin. I would rather die than be like you, because she's just this sheet of skin with eyes and a mouth.
Oh yeah.
Hung up on a frame, and
Oh,
that's
I
it.
was going to say, Alan, there's that great line as well, talking to Cassandra, and she says, "I'd rather be human than a bitsy trampoline."
Exactly. Yeah, it is quite funny, but you got to wonder. I mean, shit, if that's how the human race eventually winds up looking billions of years from now, I mean, no way. That's not evolution. That's de-evolution, right there. But somehow she's alive, and I like her bits where she has her servants around her, and she tells me, moisturize me. So they have to keep spraying her with water from a spray bottle, otherwise her skin cracks. So she has to be constantly moisturized. But yeah, she's just skin with a mouth and a pair of eyes mounted on a frame. And Zoe Wanamaker does the voice of Cassandra, and she's very funny. Again, you may remember Zoe Wanamaker as the teacher from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone, teaching Harry and his friends how to fly their broomsticks. That's probably the other thing you might know her best for. But yeah, she's very funny as Cassandra, doing the voice of Cassandra. We dig a little deeper into the relationship between the Doctor and Rose, their budding friendship, and where Rose still, is questioning, who are you, Doctor? Who are you? And he says, I'm just me. All right, I'm just me. I mean, don't get me wrong. They have a great friendship. They care about each other, and they do eventually, resolve their differences. We see in the story, and they hug each other, and they're fine. But there is one moment where they have a bit of a conflict where the Rose doesn't feel like the Doctor is telling her everything about him that she would like to know. And there's also a scene where the Doctor gives her his cell phone, or he does a little tweak to Rose's cell phone, and she's able to have a phone conversation with her mother, even though she's speaking to her mother billions of years into the future. Her mother is long dead, but they're speaking to each other over this phone line after the Doctor does this little tweak to her phone. And by the way, yes, Camille Coduri as Rose's mother, Jackie. I'd forgotten the actress's name. I like Camille Coduri a lot. I think she's very charming as Rose's mom, Jackie. And yes, as Ollie pointed out, she's obviously a very lonely woman because she doesn't have a man in her life. Her husband is, Rose's dad is long dead, and she's obviously very lonely. And yeah, she comes on to the Doctor in that previous story, Rose. The Doctor politely rejects her advances. But yeah, I think Camille Coduri is wonderful as Rose's mom, Jackie. And I'll just conclude by saying that, obviously, and there's also a great action scene towards the end where the Doctor has to get to this machinery, but he has to go past these spinning fans, these gigantic spinning fans, and obviously the wrong move, and he could be sliced in half. And the fans spin faster and faster as he works his way down the catwalk to get past the fans. I do have to admit, it's a tad bit unrealistic, I think, because when he gets to that final fan, which is spinning like crazy, but somehow the Doctor, he somehow picks just the right split second to get past the fan without being sliced. And, maybe he could have done it, but I don't think so. I think he would have been sliced, but he's the Doctor. He survives. He gets past the fan. Okay, fine, I'll go with it. But it's a really cool scene, all the same. And we conclude with that final scene where the Doctor manages to reactivate the station's force field just in time. The Earth blows up. I mean, that's what it's going to do. There's no stopping it. The Earth blows up, but the force field protects the space station and everybody on it. And the look on Rose's face as she and the Doctor are looking out the window, and they're seeing the planet having just blown up into all these tiny little pieces all around them, just floating all around them. and just the look of shock on Rose's face. Um, and then the Doctor helps Rose back into the TARDIS, takes her back to modern day, and then we get one of the very best scenes I think in Christopher Eccleston's season, where they're amongst the streets. They're in the streets amongst all the people. Rose has now seen the final day of Earth, and one of Christopher Eccleston's very best lines when he says to Rose, "You think it'll last forever, but it won't. One day it's all gone, even the sky," which is very powerful stuff. And then in order to make themselves feel better, they decide to go to a nearby shop and get some chips, which is a wonderful way to end the story. So yeah, I love The End of the World. I just totally love it. I love the story. I love the imagination behind it. The CGI work, the performances, the look of it, and just the concept of it. I just think is wonderful, and it's a very thought-provoking story. So it's definitely one of my favorite stories from the Christopher Eccleston era. I just totally love it. So yeah, I give The End of the World a perfect 10 out of 10.
Well, we go to the other end of the coin on this one. Although he does like this story, he just doesn't love it.
I will reveal in just a moment.
Yeah, I don't think Ollie's going to be as kind with this story, but nonetheless, give us your thoughts on The End of the World.
The end of the world.
The end of the stinking world. Have one of me, mate.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, Alan. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree. I can see what he's saying, though. I can understand what Alan is saying. It is, to a degree, very thought-provoking, and it is very interesting. And they do try to play it from that angle, which is great. There are great moments in The End of the World, but for me, honestly, this is my least favorite Christopher Eccleston story. I don't hate it. I don't think it's terrible. It's just okay. Like I give it a pass. It's fine, but it could have been so much more. So much more. But yeah, like the story's good. The story is interesting. With them being on platform 1, I think it is, and then meeting all those aliens and then witnessing the final days of Earth and this sort of emotional stuff with Rose and the Doctor is done well. I mean, for me, there was a little bit too much bickering, I think. Rose did slightly get a bit annoying at times for me. But I did like the phone call she had with Jackie. That was quite emotional. And Christopher Eccleston's performance is fantastic as the Doctor, pun intended, when he's talking about how his planet is gone and how his people died, but also the comical side, where he's dancing to Tainted Love at the start, which is kind of fun. So I like that. And I have to say, this episode has fantastic production values. The prosthetics and creature designs are all fabulous. Like the Mox of Balhoun, the tree people. I think one of the tree people, Jabe, who becomes friends with the Doctor at one point, and of course Cassandra. On that other moment when Christopher Eccleston says, "I give you the air from my lungs," he's like breathing on everyone, which is fantastic. Sorry, I keep saying fantastic, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I don't know. For me, just the story, it didn't really grip me that much. Like I can understand what they were trying to do, but the pacing is the thing that lets this down. I did find this story a little bit slow. I'm not going to lie to you. I know it's only 45 minutes, but still. I did like the introduction of Cassandra. I thought she was good. I liked Zoe Wanamaker. It may be her better appearance. Obviously, she's in New Earth as well, but we'll get to that later down the line with David Tennant. But yeah, it's kind of interesting how she's just this piece of skin that's kind of the last scrap of humanity, and she calls herself the last human, which is kind of weird. And when she sort of melts, when she explodes, that's kind of surprising. It's apparently like when she comes back in New Earth, she's like they take another piece of skin from the back of her body or something. Yeah, don't quite know how she survived. It's a bit of a weird explanation, but whatever. She's pretty good in this story, and I guess she's technically the villain of the story. She has those little spider droids that kind of go in and cause problems, and as Alan mentioned, that scene with the fans is interesting. It's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit unbelievable how the Doctor manages to get through that, but it's still a cool moment, despite some dated CGI. Yeah, there's a lot of tension in the story, and there's a lot of stakes. But for me, it's a very mixed bag. I've found while it looks impressive and there are really good things in it, I can't help but feeling bored every time I watch it. I just feel like the story, there isn't much there. It's very simple and it just kind of meanders on for quite a bit. But there is some nice comedy and some good drama where there needs to be, and the ending is nice where the Doctor and Rose sort of reconcile, and then she's like, "Do you want to get chips?" And he's like, "Yeah, I got no money," and she goes and buys him chips, which is nice. But maybe I was a little harsh in the review. But I'm sticking with my my thoughts that it's fine. You know, I give this story a pass, but honestly, it doesn't stand out to me other than the way it looks. You know, and obviously Murray Gold's music is on top form. But yeah, sadly, this one just I don't remember much about it. It doesn't stick out to me. It sticks out to me in a sense that the other stories are just so good. There are worse stories than this. It's not terrible. It's just a bit for me. So I'm going to give The End of the World, I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
Fair enough. Okay, thanks for that, Ollie. The end of the world, the end of the stinking world, as he said in the series 4 finale. I think I'm kind of in the middle between you and Alan. I think I like this story more than Ollie, but I don't love this story like Alan does. I think End of the World's a pretty good Doctor Who story. I wouldn't say it's my favorite of series 1, but I wouldn't say it's my least favorite story either. That's for a story later on in the season. But End of the World, I think it's a good Doctor Who story. It's an interesting concept, you know, the Doctor bringing Rose to the final days of planet Earth. Although, saying that, I mean, is that really the first adventure in time and space you want to bring your companion on? Is to show her the death of her planet? I mean, if that was me, I'd say, no thanks, Doctor. I don't think I want to be traveling with you anymore. And there is some issue with Rose in the story later on that we'll get to. But I mean, as a story itself, I mean, I really like the concept, you know, the Doctor and these bunch of aliens witnessing the final moments of planet Earth before the sun destroys it, or the remnants of the sun, the supernova, the red giant, whatever you call it. I think that's interesting. I think the cast here are very good. Eccleston's great as the Doctor. This is the first appearance of the psychic paper, which you know would go on to be a big thing in Doctor Who. They're still using it, I believe. The psychic paper basically shows you whatever you want to see. Yeah, I mean, I think the aliens here are all very interesting. You've got the Forested Chain, you've got the Moxa Balhoun, and of course, you also have the Face of Bo. And it's nice to see the Face of Bo in the story, although he doesn't really. I don't even think we even hear from the Face of Bo. It's not really until New Earth where we hear the voice of the Face of Bo, and Face of Bo would go on to appear as a character in the next few series. But I think all the aliens here are fascinating, like the Moxa Balhoun and the Forested Chain. Literally these like tree-like people. Yeah, and there was some funny moments. Eccleston gets to show off his sort of comedy moments in this story. His acting chops there. I mean, there's some funny moments like Ollie mentioned. You know, I give you air for my lungs because he doesn't have a gift, and you know he's dancing to, you know, sort of bobbing his head to Tainted Love, which is quite funny. I think Cassandra is a very good villain in this story. Zoe Wanamaker, she does a very good job. And yeah, I mean, I don't quite understand how she could still be alive. She's literally just a piece of skin, and her brain's in a jar. I don't know how she could still be alive, but I think it's a joke on plastic surgery. I don't think, you know, humanity turns out like that. I think the whole joke is she's the last human, and she's literally just a piece of skin. She's had so much cosmetic surgery that she's now just a piece of skin, and that's it. And I mean, she's the very worst of humanity. That's kind of the ironic thing about her is like, she's the last human, and she's the very worst of humanity. I mean, when I rewatched this story a couple of years ago, I hadn't seen it in years, and I didn't pick up on it as a kid. But that scene where Rose is talking to Cassandra, and she says, "Oh, I'd rather be human than be you, you bitchy trampoline." I mean, that kind of shocked me when I was rewatching it. I think that's the first time I've heard anybody swear in Doctor Who. I could be wrong, but I mean, I guess bitch isn't really a swear word because you can call a female dog a bitch, but I think that's the first time we've ever heard a swear word in Doctor Who before. I could be mistaken, but I think it is. I mean, nonetheless, it's a funny line, oh, a bitchy trampoline, which I thought was funny. I mean, there is some interesting stuff here, the Doctor and Rose. Like, we see that Rose, she really doesn't want to see the Earth destroyed because that's her planet. And we see the Doctor, he gets her phone and he basically, alters her phone so she can call anybody at any time in the universe. Like Rose says, she doesn't have reception, but she calls Jackie, and Jackie's doing the washing up, like she's washing the clothes or whatever, and she's talking to Rose on the phone, and she says, "Oh, that's like 500 million years ago," which is interesting. But I mean, there is some, conflict here of the Doctor and Rose. We see that Rose is very angry at the Doctor because, the Doctor has brought her essentially to see the destruction of her own planet. As for the side plot with Cassandra, I mean, I kind of agree with Ollie. It is a little bit weak. You got these robotic spiders, which are quite cool, and we see that they kill somebody at one point. There's a nice scene where Rose is talking to one of the workers there, and she's not allowed to talk to any of the guests, but Rose, she wants to talk to her, and then unfortunately she gets killed. But some of the side characters, they're good in the story. I do like all the stuff with the Ninth Doctor and the Forrester Chain. There's a nice moment where she does a scan on the Doctor, and she doesn't believe it, and then she finds out that he's a Time Lord, and she says, "Oh, your planet was destroyed, Gallifrey, in the Time War." And that's the first time in the new series that we found out that the Doctor, that Gallifrey's gone, that the Time Lords are dead, and he's the last of his race. And I think Eccleston's acting there is very powerful, where you see some of the tears go down his cheek, and the Forrester Chain comforts him. That's a great moment, and her death is actually quite powerful, where it's getting very hot, and she has to pull the switch, and she dies in the process. The scene afterwards where the Doctor's going through the fans, I do think I agree with Alan. I don't really, I can't really buy into that. I mean, I know the Doctor's saying you need to have faith, and he takes a walk of faith, and he manages to go through the propeller. But I mean, it's just bullshit. I mean, he would have been sliced to ribbons, or he'd have been knocked off that platform. But nonetheless, I mean, it kind of works, but I mean, at the same time, it makes no sense. But I mean, the story itself is fun. It's got some interesting characters. Like I said, all the aliens here. It's nice to see all the different aliens in the story, and I do think Cassandra's quite good, where she keeps saying, "Oh, moisturize me," and then in the end, she ends up getting killed. The skin blows up, and yeah, I don't really understand how they brought her back. They said, "Oh yeah, we got a piece of her skin from the back of her," but like her eyes and everything were destroyed. I mean, I don't really get that. But nonetheless, I mean, there are some funny moments. I like the bit where the Ninth Doctor says, "Oh, what are you gonna do? Moisturize me?" I thought that was funny. And there is a tense moment where the Doctor and Rose are locked in that room, and the sun is going to burn the whole room, and they managed to get out in the nick of time. I thought that was good. And I liked the bit afterwards at the end of the story where Rose, she just sees, Earth's gone, and she says, "Oh, it was gone, but nobody was paying attention. The Earth was destroyed while we were all panicking." And I liked the bit afterwards with the Doctor. He brings Rose back to present day, and he says, "Oh, you think it'll last forever? Cars and people and concrete, but it won't. One day it's all gone, even the sky." And I agree with Alan. That's just a very powerful moment. And I like the bit afterwards where Rose says, "Oh, I smell chips. I want chips," and the Doctor says, "Me too." And the Doctor also reveals that he's the last of the Time Lords and that his planet's gone. So, in a way, Rose can connect to the Doctor, even though when she's living, the Earth's still around, but she saw the destruction of her own world. So I thought that was a great way to end the story. So in conclusion, End of the World. I don't think it's a classic Doctor Who story. I prefer Rose, if I'm being honest, to this, but I think End of the World's good. I think my main problem with it would be that maybe some of the stuff with Cassandra and the her plot. I mean, it doesn't really make any sense. I mean, I don't know what she's trying to achieve. I think she wants to steal the money of the other people or something. I can't quite remember. I haven't seen this in a couple of years, but uh, yeah, there are some things in there that could have been explained a little bit more, and it's not as engaging as some of the other stories in series one. But I still think it's a good story. I can't say it's a bad story at all, to be honest. There's some very powerful things in there. So I'll close up by giving the End of the World. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. So yeah, now we move on to the next story in Doctor Who Series 1, written by Mark Gatiss, and we go back in time to the Victorian era, so the first historical Doctor Who story of the new series. And yeah, it features a very famous writer, the writer of A Christmas Carol and A Tale of Two Cities, Oliver Twist, Charles Dickens, Simon Callow as Charles Dickens in The Unquiet Dead. So I'll hand it over to Alan. Alan, what do you think of The Unquiet Dead?
The Unquiet Dead. Yeah, the third story for Christopher Eccleston, and the first time Eccleston's Doctor travels into the past. And yeah, as Jack pointed out, we go to Victorian England, apparently the year 1869 on Christmas Eve. And yeah, I like this story a lot. I think The Unquiet Dead is a great Doctor Who story. The look of it, I think, is really great. I love the sets and the Victorian costumes for the story. I also like the idea that you have these alien spirits that apparently are taking control of dead bodies, and basically they give the impression of dead people coming back to life. And I can never forget the one of the early scenes of this story, where the body of an old woman is brought back to life by one of these alien spirits. And by the way, these alien spirits they kill. By the way, they kill people. But anyway. Yeah, one alien spirit resuscitates the dead body of an elderly woman, and that shot where she comes right to the camera, walks right up to the camera with that shocking look in her face, just before we get to the opening credits, is like, that always gives me the creeps, always gives me the heebie-jeebies when I see that. It's a very effective shot, very, very scary, and so I like the whole feel of this story. I think the story is very intriguing, and I also like The Unquiet Dead because we get to meet Charles Dickens, brilliantly played by Simon Callow, who's not only a superb actor, but I think he has been known to do one-man shows as Charles Dickens, where I guess he'll do a reading of A Christmas Carol, and we actually get to see that in the
I
story.
actually got to see that in London a few years ago. Very impressive stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, not only is he superbly talented, but with the right makeup, and I mean, he's the spitting image of Charles Dickens. I mean, you think it's Charles Dickens, come back to life when you with Simon Callow playing him. Kind of like how Hal Holbrook was the spitting image of Mark Twain whenever Holbrook did his one-man show called Mark Twain Tonight. So now you've got Simon Callow playing Charles Dickens. I mean, perfectly cast. You believe him 100% as Charles Dickens, so he's brilliant in this story. Again, great visual effects involving the alien spirits that take over the dead bodies. I mean, pretty scary stuff, I think. Intriguing story. I also really liked Eve Miles as Gwyneth, who Rose and the Doctor befriend in this story. Actually, Gwyneth, she sacrifices herself towards the end of the story, and I was very sad to see her go. I felt really bad for her because you really, really like her. There's this one scene where Rose and Gwyneth are talking about boys, and Gwyneth tells Rose about this attractive boy that she liked, and it's such a sweet scene. It's really, really sweet, and Eve Miles, gives a really charming performance. I mean, you just like Gwyneth right away. So I was really sad to see Gwyneth go at the end of the story, even though it was a noble sacrifice in order to save everybody. But I was very sad to see her go. But it should be also known that I guess Russell T Davies liked Eve Miles so much that he brought her back for the spin-off show Torchwood, where she plays a character in Torchwood. I've never actually seen Torchwood. I know everybody tells me I should see it, and I should see it, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But yeah, Eve Miles would go on to play a role in Torchwood after this story. But she's great as Gwyneth. I like her a lot. As I say, the spirits in the story that take over the dead bodies, they are indeed really scary. And I think the CGI work in this story is very effective. But yeah, the look of it, the costumes, the concept about the alien spirits taking over the dead bodies, all of that works really well. And of course, you have a brilliant supporting performance from Simon Callow as Charles Dickens. And it's a great story. I don't know if I would call it a perfect story. The story falls a little bit short of perfection for me, maybe because there are a couple of bits in the plot that I found a little bit confusing, I suppose. So maybe that's why I can't give it the full 10 out of 10. But I think it's a great story overall. I like this one a lot. And yeah, it's another winner from the Christopher Eccleston era. So I think that's pretty much all I can say about it, really. But I do like The Unquiet Dead a lot. So I will give The Unquiet Dead a 9 out of 10.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to Ollie now, but yeah, I was going to say we can take a bit more time talking about the next couple of stories because we're not even an hour and a half in yet, and we're already on the third story. So you can take your time if you want to talk a bit more in detail about this story in the next couple. Because yeah, but anyway, I'll hand it over to Ollie now. What's your thoughts on The Unquiet Dead?
Well, The Unquiet Dead. This is a fantastic story. I really like this story because it's what Doctor Who should be. It should be scary, and that's what this is. It's a horror story. It's genuinely frightening. I mean, the whole concept of the Gelf being ghosts, but the fact that they are formed from the gas, I think, is quite interesting. The concept of them is really cool, and I think the visual effects for this story have held up really well. It's actually the one Eccleston story I don't think I've seen as much as I would have liked. And I think he's very good in this story. And I like when he's quite giddy when he sees Charles Dickens for the first time. That's kind of cool. Billie Piper's good as Rose. She's definitely a lot better than she was in the last story. She's not as annoying. And the costume she's wearing is really good. They've got some great chemistry. And the period setting of the 1800s is really well done. And it definitely looks like they've stepped back in time, which is really clever. So well done. And the script is pretty solid. I agree with Alan. There may be a couple of parts of the plot that went over my head, but more often than not, it was a really cool story. And I like the character of Gwyneth, played by Eve Miles. She's very good. And of course, we get the first hint towards Bad Wolf, which will be a sort of common thing that will run through series 1, and we'll understand more about that in Bad Wolf, the story, which is the finale. But no, this story is great. It moves at a much better pace than the last one, and Simon Callow is a fantastic Charles Dickens. I mean, I saw him in London do a one-man show of Christmas Carol. He's a very talented guy, very suited to the role of Charles Dickens, and he's great in this story as well. He's such a delight, and the fact that he gets involved in all the action as well is fantastic. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I don't remember too much. But all the supporting cast were very good, and the music, of course, was great. And again, Eccleston's having the time of his life playing this role. And I agree with Alan. The opening scene where someone is that body's like got resurrected or something, and then the woman comes right into frame as we hear the screams, genuinely frightening. This was probably one of the stories that was like a borderline. Will they show it? Pre-Watershed, because it's like, oh god, this is scary. I mean, as a young viewer, I would have been pretty terrified if I saw this the first time. But yeah, and it's a good story, and it also like hints towards like the rift in time and space, which becomes a big thing, and the fact that the rift is in Cardiff is, I suppose, kind of a joke really because of the fact they film in Cardiff. But yeah, it's cool that Russell's kind of establishing all of that stuff. But yeah, this is a great story, really great story. It's just the true essence of Doctor Who. So for me, I don't really have any major issues with the story. I think it's great, and I think the ending is very powerful when Gwyneth has to sacrifice herself to save everybody and stop the Gelth. Yeah, so I'm going to give The Unquiet Dead a fantastic score of 10 out of 10.
Well, we're really racing through the first 3 stories of series 1. Like I said, we can't take a bit more time with the next couple because we've only been on an hour and a half. But yeah, The Unquiet Dead, the first historical story of Doctor Who series 1, and I think it's a great story. I don't think it's perfect. I couldn't quite give it a 10, but I definitely think it's very good. I think Mark Gatiss did a terrific job here for his first script of the new series. I think he did a very good job. I really love the setting of Victorian Wales. I think it is, or is it Victorian London or yeah, I think it's Victorian London. But of course, Eve Miles, who plays one of the characters in there, she's Welsh. But I mean, yeah, it was probably shot in Wales. But yeah, I mean, I think the beginning of the story is quite funny, where you got the Doctor working on the TARDIS, and Rose is dressed up in Victorian outfit, and he says, "Oh, you look beautiful." And he's got a different jumper this time, instead of that sort of burgundy jumper. He's got a sort of green jumper in this one, and I mean, I think the story is just great. I mean, I really like the concept of these creatures called the Gelth, who take over the bodies of the dead, and it's very creepy. And like Alan said, there's that great shot of that old woman when she comes towards the camera, when she's possessed by the Gelth. That's really great. I think Simon Callow in the story is excellent as Charles Dickens. I mean, like Ollie said, I mean, he's played Charles Dickens on stage, and he would return to make a brief cameo in Doctor Who Series 6, The Wedding of River Song. I mean, the less said about that, the better. But he's great here as Charles Dickens. And I like the fact that, Charles Dickens in the story is kind of fed up. I mean, by this point in his life and his career, he's sort of he's been putting out all these books, and he's been doing all these stage shows, and, reading his books and stuff like that. And you can tell he's kind of a little bit weary of life. And I mean, there's just some great lines in this. I love the bit with the Gelf where he says, "What the Shakespeare," instead of "What the Dickens," which I thought was quite funny. And I love the scene where the Doctor first meets him, and he's in the carriage, and he says, "Oh, Dickens, Charles Dickens, I'm a massive fan." And then Charles Dickens says, "Oh, wait, you're a fan?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm a big fan." And he says, "How are you a device that cools oneself?" And he thinks he's talking about a fan that you use to cool yourself down. But he says, "Oh, no, no, I'm a fan. I'm fanatical about your books." And and then he's talking about his work, which is quite funny. And I mean, I think Eccleston's very good in his story. He gives a very good performance. I think the rest of the cast are very good as well. I think Eve Miles is very good in this. Is it Gwen? Yeah, Gwyneth. Yeah, she's very good in the story. And yeah, like Alan said, I like that scene where she's talking to Rose, and she's saying about this young man that she used to fancy. That was good. And then she says, something about the Doctor and the big bad wolf. I think that's great, and I really like that scene where they have that séance, and we see that the Gelf are there, and they're communicating to the Doctor, and they're saying that we've lost our home world and we need these bodies, so that we can live again. I think that's very well done. And I like the bit afterwards where Rose is talking to the Doctor, and she says, you can't have these beings, you can't have the Gelf possess these bodies, it's wrong. And the Doctor says, well, tough. If you're gonna be in the TARDIS with me, you're just gonna have to deal with the stuff that's going on. You're just gonna have to, live by my rules. Which I think in this case it's understandable, because the Doctor is essentially saying to Rose that if you want to be in the TARDIS with me, if you want to go traveling around the universe, going in, forward in time and back in time, then you're just going to have to stick by my rules, and if you don't like it, then you can leave. So I think that was great, and I mean, there are some interesting moments in this. There's this older guy, and there's that moment where Rose is knocked out, and I like the line later on that Rose says, "Oh, you old man, I heard, I know you had a little bit of a feel, you dirty old man." So that was a good line. Essentially, that old guy, when Rose was knocked out, he was sort of like touching her up. So I mean, I kind of like the fact that Rose confronted him and said, "You're a dirty old man. Do you think I didn't know you were having a good old wonder, whatever?" That was good, and the soundtrack's very good by Murray Gold. I mean, Murray Gold. This was when he started out as a composer for Doctor Who. He'd go on, until the Capaldi era. I don't know if they're going to bring him back for Russell T Davies's second era. I mean, I kind of think they shouldn't bring him back, because I think he's had his time with the show. But the soundtrack here is very good. Like I said, there's some great scenes, the Gelf in this story, how they possess bodies, and I like the stuff with Shakespeare, that how he just does not believe any of this stuff. He just does not, you know, he just doesn't think it's real. And the Doctor says to him, but you're the guy who wrote A Christmas Carol. You're the man who wrote, Oliver Twist and A Tale of Two Cities and all these classics. How can you not stretch your imagination to believe that this is happening? And he says, yeah, but that's fiction. I know it's real. I'm the Doctor. He's kind of disappointed by the fact that Dickens in the story just won't believe what's happening around him. But nonetheless, I think all that's great. I think the drama's great. The stuff with Gwen is very interesting, because she sort of becomes the vessel that the Gelf communicate through. There's that whole seance where they're talking to the Doctor, and he agrees to having them possess the bodies of the dead so that they can come back. I really like that scene in the cellar when the Doctor's with Rose, and Rose says, "Oh, we can't die here. I was born in London in the future. I can't die here, right?" And he says, "I'm sorry. It's very possible you can be born in the future and die in the past." And then he says, "Oh, I never thought it would end like this. Dying." In a cell in Cardiff, and he finds out that the Gelf, they betrayed him. They've taken the bodies, and they're trying to kill him and take over. So it's interesting how like the Time Wars affected everything. Like we saw in Rose, a lot of the Nestine homeworlds were destroyed. Here, the Gelf, they've been completely destroyed by the Time War, and now they're trying to possess these bodies so they can come back. But it's interesting how they trick the Doctor, and I think that works really well. I like the stuff with Gwen at the end of the story, where we see that she gets the box of matches, and Charles Dickens helps save the day. He like fills the room with gas, and she gets the box of matches, and she lights the match, and it blows up herself, and it also destroys the Gelf. I thought that was a really great moment, and it was quite sad. And I like the ending of the story where the Doctor's with Charles Dickens, and he says, "In the future, people will still be reading your work," and all of that. And then the Doctor's talking to Rose in the TARDIS, and he says, "This is his last year. before he dies. He'll die later on, today or during this year. So that was kind of sad. Sort of a poignant way to end the story. But yeah, in conclusion, I think The Unquiet Dead, I think it's a very good Doctor Who story. I think it's terrific. I think Mark Gatiss did a really good job here. And I really like the story of the Gelf, how they're sort of taking over these bodies and how they trick the Doctor. And I love the Victorian setting, Victorian London. And Simon Callow's great as Charles Dickens. I think Billie Piper's very good. The actress, I forget her name, Eve Miles, who plays Gwyneth. She's very good in the story. The costume design's great, the locations, it's all fantastic. My only maybe minor complaint of this story would be, there is some parts of the plot that aren't explained that much, but apart from that, I think it's a very good Doctor Who story. And I'll close off by giving The Unquiet Dead a very solid 9 out of 10. So yeah, we move on to the next story in this series. Like I said, we've only been on an hour and a half, so take your time. You don't have to rush your thoughts on this next story. You can go into detail. The story, it's an interesting one. Let's just say it's the first two-parter of Doctor Who Series 1. And if you're wondering why we're doing this reflection in two parts, well, there's 10 stories in this season, and I thought it would be better if we just split them in half, because otherwise we'll be up all night talking about all 10 stories in this season. But we're just going to talk about both of these parts as one. So the next story, it's the first two-part of Series 1. The first of 3 two-parters, and it introduces an alien called the Slitheen. The aliens aren't called Slitheen's. The family is called the Slitheen's, but they're Raxacorical Fallivatorians. Yes, the one with the farting aliens, as some people call it. But yeah, Aliens in London, World War III, the first two-parter of Series 1. And like I said, you could take your time with this one. We've only got one more story after this, so go into as much detail as you want, and I'll pass it over to Alan. What do you think of Aliens of London and World War III?
Okay, Aliens of London and World War III, the first two-parter of the new Doctor Who series. I like it, but this story is to me what The End of the World is to Ollie. This is my least favorite story of Christopher Eccleston's era. I like it. It's not that I don't. I like it. I give it a pass, but it's the one that I rank at the bottom. It's a solid Doctor Who story, but I'm just not a huge fan of it, to be honest with you. My main beef personally with this story are the Slitheen. I'm just not a fan of the Slitheen. I think they're very ridiculous looking aliens. They're these big, baby faced green aliens with these big black eyes, but they're all baby faced. And the gag that they make, here's the thing, they're not farts, but they sound like farts. I guess they called it a gas exchange. The thing is that the Slitheen are disguised as humans, and it turns out that the human bodies that the Slitheen wear are like rubber suits or something like that. They look human, but they can unzip them, and the fact is there's this compression thing that happens with the Slitheen, because the Slitheen are huge aliens. So in order to get into these smaller human costumes, there's like this gas exchange that I guess compresses their bodies so they can fit into these fake human exteriors, if you're following me. Whenever they unzip their human bodies and reveal their true Slitheen natures, there's this farting noise that happens. So it's not actually farts, but they sound like farts. But the fact is that they beat this gag over our heads over and over and over and over again. I mean, there's only so many times you can hear, before it's not funny anymore, and they keep beating this gag into you. I guess it's because hey, farts are funny. Farting noises are funny, so they just bash it over our heads. But the first time it's funny, second time funny but not as funny, the third time maybe borderline funny, but the time you get to the fourth, fifth, or sixth gag with it's just not funny anymore. And it gets really tiresome. And again, I don't like the design of the Slitheen because again they have like these big baby faces, and they're really not all that menacing despite their huge size. But I'm just not a fan of the Slitheen. I just think they look pretty ridiculous. And again, the thing with the farting noise, that gag that just beat it over our heads over and over and over again for these 2 episodes. Um, but I mean, it's not without its entertainment value. I mean, I think this is also the story where the Slitheen spaceship slices through Big Ben and destroys the top of Big Ben. That was a very impressive special effect. Um, I like that bit a lot. Yeah, the ship it slices into Big Ben and then it crashes into the Thames River. I think, if memory serves me correct. I mean, all of that really good CGI work. The visual effects there are top notch. Um, I do think Christopher Eccleston is in fine form in this story. Billy Piper as Rose, uh, Camille Coterie as Jackie Tyler, Rose's mom, and then of course you got Noel Clarke as Rose's boyfriend Mickey. They all have roles to play in this story, which is good. This is also the story that introduces the character of Harriet Jones, played by Penelope Wilton, and she becomes a political figure in this story. I think she starts out as a reporter, but then she will eventually work her way up to actually becoming prime minister, I think, for a time. I mean, by the time we see her with David Tennant's doctor. And Penelope Wilton, very talented actress, very good supporting role from her. I like her a lot. And yeah, we will definitely see more of Harriet Jones later on in the series. But yeah, I do like Penelope Wilton a lot as Harriet Jones, so she's quite good here. Um, there is, let's see, there are other bits that stand out for me in this story. The bit where, let's see, the doctor is trying to figure out how to stop the Slitheen. I think there's a scene where Jackie and Mickey are under threat by a Slitheen, but they're on the phone line with the doctor about what to do, and so the doctor and Rose and Harriet are trying to figure out how to help them. And Rose and Harriet are giving the doctor information about the Slitheen, and the doctor keeps saying, narrows it down, narrows it down, narrows it down, narrows it down, narrows it down. And then they figure out that the way to stop the Slitheen is to throw vinegar at them, because apparently they have a fatal reaction to vinegar, something like that. So the next thing you know, Jackie and Mickey are throwing vinegar at the Slitheen, and they kill it. But the way they do that scene is very amusing, I thought. I'm not sure this story needed to be 2 episodes. I don't see why it couldn't have been done in just 1 episode. Um, but it's still an entertaining story. It's still solid. I'll also say that the other supporting players playing the other Slitheen in human form are good. I guess the standout would be, let's see, Annette Badlin in the role of Margaret Blaine. She's the lone female Slitheen. And in fact, they will bring her back later on in this season for another story. I don't remember the title, but she will be brought back for one more story this season. And yeah, she's quite good. You definitely remember her physically. I mean, she's a very big woman. She's very portly, but she is a very successful character actress. And very talented. She's also done a lot of voice work. I did read up on her work, and yeah, she's actually done a lot of work, including voice work for radio and things like that. And yeah, very talented actress, very talented character actress, and that's nice that they will bring her back for one more story later this season as Margaret Blaine, the Slitheen in human form. So she's the standout Slitheen for me in the story. I do like the visual effect where the Slitheen unzip themselves, and there's like this big blinding light that flashes all around them as they are unzipping themselves, and we see them in the full Slitheen form. I thought that was a neat effect. I just got tired of the farting noise gag, but otherwise the visual effect when they unzip themselves and reveal their true form is a cool effect. Um, it's been a while since I've seen this story. I don't know if I have too much more to say about it, but I mean, it's a mixed bag. But in the end, for me, there's more good in it than bad. But when I look back at Christopher Eccleston's one season as the Doctor, this is usually the story that, well, not usually. This is the story that I like the least. You know, I don't hate it at all. I think it's a good Doctor Who story. In my opinion, Eccleston had no bad stories. It's just that some of his stories I like more than others. But this is probably the story that I would rank at the bottom regarding Christopher Eccleston. But it's still a good story. You know, I still like it. Um, so I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, I'll give this doubleheader of Aliens of London and World War III a 7 out of 10. Although I'll say it's probably, I'll be a little generous. I'll say it's a high 7 as opposed to a low 7. I'll give it a high 7, but 7 out of 10 from me for Aliens of London and World War III.
All right, nice. We'll hand over to Ollie now.
Thank you. Woo! Oh. Oh. Someone open a window, please. Woo! Okay, I'm only joking. But yeah, Aliens of London and World War III, the first two-part story of the new series and of Eccleston's era. Yeah, I like this one. I think it's very underrated. This was actually the very first Doctor Who story I ever watched. So, yeah, it's kind of got a special place in my heart. I will admit, it's not perfect. It certainly has its problems. Perhaps the farting gag is a little overused. But I think this is a good story for what it is, because for all the silliness you have with the Slitheen, there's a pretty good plot, and I think the stakes are pretty high. And there's also a lot of emotional drama. So I think it's got a bit of everything, really. And I don't really mind the fact that it's two parts. It's very entertaining. You know, the way it starts with the ship crashing the Big Ben and stuff, and then there's a whole mystery as to why that's going on. But also the emotional drama with Rose, because she comes back home and realizes that she's been gone a whole year, and the Doctor basically fucked up and brought her back at the wrong time, which is a little weird. So yeah, everybody's having to get used to that. And Mickey was interrogated as a potential murder suspect. You know, he was accused of murdering her or abusing her or whatever, and Jackie was looking for her for a whole year. So it's a little weird when she comes back. The atmosphere is not good. It's very tense, and she's finding it hard to kind of explain to her mum that she's been traveling in time and all of that stuff. And you know, it's actually kind of funny when Jackie's having her rant, and then she's like, "What sort of doctor are you?" He's like, "I am a doctor. Prove it. Stitch this, mate." And then she slaps him across the face, which is kind of funny. And then one line which is a bit strange, though, is later on when the Doctor and Rose are talking, and he's like, 900 years of time and space, and they've been slapped by anyone's mother. It hurts. And she's like, "You're so gay." Like, what? Okay. What the hell, Russell? Okay, whatever. It's a little weird. But still, the Slitheen, I mean, I like the Slitheen's design. I think they look kind of cool. Yeah, they aren't the most threatening villains, but, you know, they are fun. I think they're, if there was ever to be like a likable, lovable villain, then it's them. You know, they are meant to be goofy. That's part of the charm, I think. There are some Doctor Who villains in the classic era which are goofy, but it's all good. Like the scene when they have to unzip the skin suits to reveal their true form, and they compress themselves inside there, and it obviously causes a gas exchange. I mean, like the reason for the farting is kind of it's kind of funny, the fact that they call it a gas exchange, because it's all a bunch of compression. But yeah, it's interesting, their plot to sort of take over the world by faking the whole crashing into the Big Ben thing. But yeah, no, I really like the story, and I like the fact that also we see Harriet Jones, you know, introduction of Harriet Jones. I think she's a great character. Penelope Walton does a great job, and yes, she does become the Prime Minister later on. She's like an MP who comes in to try and help the government during the alien crisis, but of course she doesn't realize that the government are aliens. Eccleston is actually on fine form here. I think this is one of his best performances. You know, he gives some really great lines. Narrows it down. Yep, narrows it down. I think you'll find the Prime Minister is an alien in disguise. That's never going to work, is it? It's between you and me. One word of advice. Don't stand him against the lift. So many charming, great lines. I think he nails it in this one. This is, you know, one of his most funny performances. Yeah, again, also Noel Clarke as Mickey, very good. Mickey gets quite a bit to do, actually. Jackie and Mickey get to fight Slitheen at Mickey's flat when the policeman turns up, and Jackie's like, "It's the thing, it's the Slitheen," and then they get this like mixture of pickled onions and pickled eggs or something. They throw it at the Slitheen and explode it, which is kind of an amusing sequence. And then the Doctor, Rose, and Harriet are locked inside Downing Street, and they can't get out because the Slitheen are on the other side of the door. And then the Doctor's like, "Mickey the idiot, the world is in your hands," you know. And we discover that Mickey's actually very good with computers, and he manages to hack into like NATO or something, and manages to order like a nuclear missile strike or something on Downing Street. So Mickey has his uses, and we do start to see that. And the Doctor initially actually offers Mickey to come with him. At the end, he's like, "You can come with us," and Mickey's like, "No, I can't do this. That world of yours, Doctor, is a bit too much for me." But obviously, in series 2, he will change his mind when the Doctor becomes David Tennant. Yeah, and it's a great story. It's full of great sort of stakes and great comedy, great moments with the Doctor and Rose. You know, and again, a lot of family drama this time as well. There's a lot of domestic stuff going on, but I think the central narrative is really quite interesting. Again, it's not the best story ever. It's not the most riveting plot, but I think it's actually really good, and it's a lot better than people say it is. Some of the CG is dated. Yeah, and I guess this is also kind of the introduction to UNIT in the new series. I mean, when the Doctor goes to the lab and he kind of comes across the soldiers, and they just suddenly start taking orders from him. I guess they just know who he is. I mean, that's a bit random. Like when that pig is shot, who I think was the pilot of the ship, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, that scene kind of always felt a bit kind of out of left field at first for me. But yeah, it's a great story, and the villains are they're just fabulous. I mean, the three main ones that we focus on, like Margaret and Joseph Green and the General, they're all charismatic characters. Oh, has someone been naughty? Just some fabulous lines. And yeah, like there's all this drama as well. Like Jackie wants the Doctor to promise that Rose will be safe, and he's like, "I could save the world but lose you." And there's this whole thing about like Jackie reports the Doctor to the government. This is like, "I'm really nervous about this man he calls himself the Doctor," and the Doctor's kind of captured and put on red alert and everything. So there's a lot going on, I think, in this story, which is probably why it's 2 parts. But yeah, for me, this is a great story. Other than the farting gags being overused, I think this is a great ton of fun. So yeah, I'm going to give this story a 9 out of 10. I think it's great, very good.
Okay, Aliens of London, World War III. All I have to say is this.
And now, Pigs in Space!
Yeah, that's what they should have called it, Pigs in Space.
Oh, you're right. I completely forgot about that. There's an alien pig in this story, and yeah, you're right. It reminds me of Pigs in Space from the Muppet Show. Yeah, forgot to mention that.
Yeah, Aliens of London, World War III. Oh, please, would you mind not farting while I'm trying to save the world? I didn't actually fart, just blew a raspberry there. Yeah, Aliens of London and World War III. This is the first 2-parter of Series 1, and I think it's great. I think it's I don't think it's amazing. I wouldn't say it's like a 10 out of 10 story, but I'm more fully on this one. I think it's underrated. I mean, I don't think it's the best, the series one, not by a long shot, but I don't think it's the worst either. I mean, I think with this story, it's pretty interesting because you can tell Russell with this is trying to go for a lot more of a lighthearted romp. He's trying to go for a much more comedic Doctor Who story, which some people might complain about and say, well, we don't really need that in Doctor Who. But, to me personally, um, yeah, I think it's a very good Doctor Who story. I think Eccleston in this is fantastic. I think he gives a great performance. No pun intended. He's great in this, and I really like the setting it in 10 Downing Street, as Rose says. Yeah, um, it's just a really fun story. It's just a very, fun, lighthearted Doctor Who story. I mean, I can understand if people have have a problem, with this because as a Doctor Who story, it is very silly, like with the farting and all of that. But I mean, I enjoy it. I mean, I think Doctor Who, you can have more lighthearted stories. You can have, like Alan said, there's good silly and there's bad silly. When it comes to films and TV shows, and I think I mean, Doctor Who's done silly stories in the past, like Horns and Imon, my dreams of conquest, and all of that. But I mean, but saying that, I think it's a very just it's an entertaining Doctor Who story. It's not meant to be like something like Bad Wolf or Parting of the Ways. It's not meant to be like a very dark story like Genesis of the Daleks. It's not trying to be um this overly dark story. It's more of a lighthearted romp. But I mean, I think as a Doctor Who story, it's really good. I really like the stuff in here. Like I said, I like the characters like Harriet Jones, and she keeps saying Harriet Jones, MP for such and such. And we see that she's trying to get into Downing Street and meet the Prime Minister, and they say, you can't do this, and then she hides in the closet. And it's interesting to see how all these fat people are in the story, and we see that they start farting, and it is kind of childish. I mean, this story is geared more towards kids, I would say. But I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, we find out that it's a gas exchange because the Slovene are trying to fit into these suits, these human suits. And I do think the way the Slovene reveal themselves in the story, I do think that's pretty cool. The way they like unzip their forehead, and then you see this beam of light come out. I think that's very good and kind of scary. Like as a kid watching that, it was kind of creepy. And as for the Slovene themselves, I can kind of see where Alan's saying about them sort of being baby face, with the sort of the weird eyes that they have. But I mean, I think they're. I mean, I do like the design of Slovene. I really like the fact that they're these giant green creatures, and they've got these massive claws, and they actually used real prosthetics on for the Slovene, which I think works really well. There is some dated CGI in the story, like when the Slovene are running after the Doctor and Rose and all that, and you can tell quite clearly it's CGI and not somebody in a rubber suit or whatever. But I think they're quite cool, and I do like the fact that we do have some reporters in this story. Like we have Andrew Marr, and all over the news you see this crash spaceship in London, and they did a very good job of doing that, like getting BBC reporters at the time. And I mean, there is some funny dialogue there. Like I like all the stuff at the start of the story where the Doctor says you've been gone 12 hours, and then it turns out the Doctor, he sees that wanted poster, and we see that Rose is with Jackie, and she drops her cup of tea, and the Doctor says, oh, you haven't been gone 12 hours, you've been gone 12 months. And we see that she's been on this missing person list. So I like that. I mean, it's kind of interesting how, leaving the travel of the Doctor does have its consequences, because we all know that the Doctor, he can't control the TARDIS sometimes, and he ends up messing it up. And there is some funny dialogue there with the police officer saying, "Oh, when you say a relationship, would this be a sexual relationship?" And he says no. And I love the bit where Jackie says, "Oh, you're a doctor? Then stitch this, mate." And then she, slaps him in the face. And there's some funny dialogue afterwards where she's talking to the Doctor on the roof, and the Doctor says, 900 years in time and space, never been slapped by somebody's mother before. And she says, "Oh, you're so gay," and he says, "Oh, it hurt." And then we see that the spaceship, it crashes into Big Ben. And actually, even though they use CGI for the ship landing in the water, that close up of the ship colliding with Big Ben, they used a model for that. And that still holds up. I mean, it's very convincing, in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, part one, you could argue there is a bit of padding in there. The whole build up to the Slovene, like you got that, alien pig running about. And yeah, it does kind of remind me of the Muppet Show, Pigs in Space. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of, funny in that, in that way. But I do like the stuff with Eccleston as the Doctor, and he says, "Oh, it's first contact. You should be celebrating with the rest of your race." And he gives Rose the TARDIS key, and he goes off in the TARDIS on his own, and he confronts these soldiers, and these soldiers are with him, and they see the pig, and he sees the pig, and they shoot the pig. And I like the bit afterwards where the Doctor says, "It was scared. It was scared," and we see that he's he feels really bad for this creature that they've killed. And we find out that the aliens, they took like an ordinary pig and they fused it with alien technology. So I think Eccleston's great, and I love that whole scene as well, where you've got the Doctor in the TARDIS and Rose is there, and we see that they're given this red alert, and they find a doctor, and he says, "We're going to 10 Downing Street," and Rose is like, "10 Downing Street." That's a great moment. And I love the stuff of Mickey here as well. This is the first story where Mickey really confronts the Doctor. He's basically saying, "What are you doing with Rose? They accuse me of being a murderer. They accuse me of killing you and all this stuff." And I mean, it's kind of sad because we see that the relationship between Jackie and Mickey has really broken down in that year that Rose has been missing. And I do like the fact that this story addresses that. Like we see that Jackie, she says, "Oh, why didn't you write, or why didn't you try and contact me?" And I think the drama there works really well, because even though it's only been like a few days for Rose, it hasn't been that long. It's been a year for Jackie, and it's been quite traumatic for her. And she doesn't trust the Doctor. She doesn't trust him because she left with Rose for a year. And I think that's great. I think the drama there is great. It's quite funny when someone makes like a cake of the alien spaceship, the Slovene spaceship. You got a few jelly babies surrounding the base. And yeah, I mean the aliens in this, they're kind of silly, like I said, like the Slovene. Like we see at one point, there's this guy who arrives and he says, "Oh, he's the head of confectionery, hardly the most important man in the world." And then we see the Slovene, they take off their skin suits and they put them on these hangers. And there is some funny dialogue there where they're talking to the general, and he says, "Oh, pardon me," and he starts farting. And then we see that Margaret says, "I'm shaking my booty," and they are all farting. And it is kind of childish and stuff, but nonetheless, we see that general's killed, and Harriet Jones is watching it. And I do like the ending of part one where you have Unit there. It's a shame they didn't have the Brigadier, but it's nice they brought Unit back. And we see that one of the guys, one of the Slovene farts. And I love that line from Eccleston. "No, excuse me, will you mind not farting when I'm trying to save the world?" That's very funny. I thought that was hilarious. and then we see that they electrocute the Doctor, and then we get into part two, World War Three, where we see the Doctor. He uses the cord that's around his neck, and he electrocutes the Slovene, and he manages to stop the Slovene attacking him. And then I like the bit afterwards where the soldiers come in, and he says, "Oh, you're not going to buy my story that these people are aliens and they've tried to take over," and they say no. Um, so that was funny. I thought that was very funny in this story. And yeah, Eccleston's great when he's in the lift and he sees a Slovene and he's like, "Hello," I thought that was quite funny. I thought that was good. So Eccleston, he's very good in the story. He's very funny. There's some, weird lines in this, like when Slovene says, "Oh, I need to be naked." I mean, that's kind of funny, in my opinion. The stuff with Harriet Jones, I think, is pretty good. We see that Jackie, she's confronted by Slovene at one point in the kitchen. There's that Slovene who's a police officer, and she's the Slovene's trying to kill Jackie, and then Mickey comes around, and the Doctor, he locks himself and Harriet Jones and Rose in the room, and we see the Slovene are outside, and like Alan says, the Doctor says, "Oh, narrows it down." She says, "Oh, they have bad breath," and he says, "That's it, calcium decay." And he says, "Oh, do you have any vinegar?" And we have Jackie, and she's like, "Oh, pickle and onions and all that," and she throws the vinegar at the Slovene, and the Slovene blows up. And I mean, it is kind of silly that vinegar destroys it, but it's like made out of living calcium or something like that. So that works, and that's kind of a funny moment. And we find out that Mickey's very good at computers. Like we see that he hacks into the Ministry of Defense. The Doctor helps him out on the phone, and we see that the Doctor starts talking to the Slovene. And there's some great dialogue there. He's got the Sonic, and he says, "Oh, come one step closer, and I will triplicate the flammability of this drink. It'll destroy you." And then we see that he's talking to the Slovene, and he says, "Oh, you want to take over the world?" And they start laughing. And Margaret Slovene and the others reveal that they don't want to take over the world; they want to sell the world, and basically they want to, sell the world as fuel. And I like that. I like the fact that it's not your cliched, "Oh, we're aliens that want to take over the world." No, these aliens, they don't, they want to destroy the world and sell it off as fuel. And I think that's very good. And we find out that there's the Slovene family from Raxacorcal Fallipatorius. And we find out that they're sort of business, aliens, which I think is really great. And yeah, and there's some great drama there. Like I like the bit where Margaret says, to the Doctor, "Yeah, we're going to destroy the world," and the Doctor says, "Not if I have anything to say about it, I'll stop you." And then Margaret laughs at him and says, "Oh, what, you trapped in your box?" And the Doctor says, "Yes, me." And he shuts the door on her. And then we see that Slovene, they want the codes for the nuclear missiles, and the Doctor, he gets Mickey to hack into the Ministry of Defense and send a couple of nuclear missiles to London to blow up Downing Street. And the Doctor and Harriet and Rose, they get in this closet, and we see that Downing Street is blown up, which is quite shocking. But they managed to survive. They managed to survive, and then the Doctor sees Harriet Jones. She starts talking to the press, and the Doctor reveals to Rose that she'll later become the Prime Minister, which is great. And the Doctor says, "Oh, she leads Britain through its new golden age." That was a really nice, way to cap off the story. And I like the ending of it, where we see that he's with Rose, and he's with Jackie, and he's with Mickey. And we see that Jackie says to Rose, "Stay around for a while." And we see that Mickey's reading this newspaper, and people are saying that the alien invasion, it was a hoax. And the Doctor says, "Oh, the world's not ready for it yet." And I do like the bit at the end where he offers Mickey to travel with him, and Mickey says no. And it's kind of funny that he turns down the Doctor because later on in series 2 he would become a companion, but we see that he just doesn't want to go with the Doctor, and then we see that Rose, she leaves with the Doctor, and Jackie's kind of upset by this, and that's a nice way to cap off the story. So in conclusion, I think Aliens of London World War Three, it's not perfect. I mean, there are some things in there that are a little bit ridiculous, like the whole farting, Slovene. I mean, it is kind of funny the first 2 or 3 times, but as a gag, they do overuse it. And I mean, I think the soundtrack's very good by Murray Gold. I like the Slovene, the design of them. I like the storyline of how they just don't want to take over the world. They also want to sell the world off. I thought that was good. I really like Harriet Jones as a character, and she had returned a couple of times in the David Tennant era of Doctor Who. And as a story, I think it's really solid. I think it's underrated. It's definitely not my favorite story of series 1, but it's definitely not my least favorite either. I enjoy it, and I think it works at 2 parts. I think for a 2-part story, it flies by. It doesn't overstay its welcome, in my opinion. But yeah, I'm going to close off by giving Aliens in London World War Three. I'll give it a 8 out of 10. So yeah, now we come to the halfway point of series 1, and this story is very significant because after 17 years, nearly 20 years away from the show, we have the return of the iconic creatures, the iconic enemy of the Doctor, the Daleks. The Daleks who make their first appearance in Doctor Who since Remembrance of the Daleks in 1988. So, yeah, nearly 20 years off our screens, and we have the return of the Daleks. And this story is a very beloved Doctor Who story. Definitely one of the highlights of Series 1. Some people would say it's Eccleston's best story and the best story, or one of the best stories of the new series. And that's Daleks. So I'll pass it over to Alan. Give us your thoughts on the return of those iconic creatures. Give us your thoughts on Dalek.
Dalek! The return of the Daleks, although there's a reason why this story is simply called Dalek, and that's because we only see one single Dalek for this whole story, but that's all they need. Just one single Dalek. That's all that's required for this story. You don't need to see the rest. One Dalek will do just fine. Thank you very much. Dalek. Wow. Wowzer. This is a fucking phenomenal Doctor Who story, and this is easily my favorite story from Christopher Eccleston's era. I also think that, yeah, this is one of the very best Doctor Who stories ever made. In fact, I would put this in my personal top 10 of the all-time greatest Doctor Who stories ever made, and that's combining both the classic series and the new series. I really think it's that good. It's an all-time top 10 story for me. It might even be in the top 5 for me. But for me, this is Christopher Eccleston's masterpiece, his very best story as far as I'm concerned. And what a phenomenal return of the Daleks. And like I said, this story only has one Dalek in it. That's all. One. But that was all they needed. And another reason why I think the story works so well, first of all, I have to give it up for the writer, not Terry Nation, who is no longer with us, but Robert Shearman. Robert Shearman wrote this story, but he definitely did his homework about the Daleks, and I think if Terry Nation were alive today, the Terry Nation, the man who created the Daleks, I think he would be very, very proud of Robert Shearman for doing the Daleks justice with this story. And the fact that Shearman also added an extra layer to the Daleks, or at least an extra layer to this one particular Dalek that we see. Another reason why I totally adore this story, and I think it's the very best story from Eccleston's era, I think another reason is because for the very first time, I actually cared about a Dalek, even though you're not supposed to care about them at all, or at least I cared about this Dalek insofar as I felt bad for it, because this particular Dalek is being held prisoner by this multi-billionaire douchebag named Henry Van Stratten, played by Corey Johnson. The Dalek is being held against its will, and it's being tortured. And we can see that it is in pain and it is suffering. And even though, yeah, it's a Dalek, okay, it's the epitome of evil, but the fact is, this is a Dalek that has had the tables literally turned against it, and now it's a prisoner and it's in pain and it's suffering, and it continues to suffer throughout this whole story, and until it finally this Dalek literally commits suicide at the end. And the fact is, this story actually made me care about a Dalek. It made me feel bad for a Dalek. I mean, I think that speaks volumes about how powerful this particular story is. I don't think Christopher Eccleston has ever been better as the Doctor, even though, of course, he's going to be, brilliant in his remaining stories, of course, and he was brilliant in the previous stories as well. But I mean, I think this was the very best script he ever got, and I think it was the very best performance he gave as the Ninth Doctor. I mean, he's on fire in this story, in the acting department. Yeah, but again, I love the whole setting of the story that they're in. It's like some underground bunker where Henry Van Stratten, the multi-billionaire, he collects alien artifacts. And I think it was also cool that we see on display in this bunker, he has in a glass case the head of a Cyberman, which I think is the only time we ever see a Cyberman in a Christopher Eccleston story, and it's just the head in a glass case. But that was cool to see. But he managed to get a Dalek. He managed to capture a Dalek, even though he doesn't know what this Dalek creature is actually called. And apparently the Dalek has refused to speak in his presence. So Von Stratten doesn't even know that the Dalek can speak, and he doesn't know exactly what it's called. But the Doctor and Rose materialize the TARDIS in this bunker, and yes, the Doctor eventually finds this Dalek being held prisoner. And the scene where Eccleston's Doctor confronts the Dalek, and initially the Doctor is scared. The Dalek immediately recognizes the Doctor. It doesn't matter that the Doctor's regenerated several times. The Dalek knows that it's the Doctor, and the Doctor is initially scared of the Dalek, but once the Doctor sees that the Dalek is being held prisoner and his laser gun does not work, that's when the Doctor is like, oh, so how does it feel? Kind of like how John Pertwee's Doctor was in Death to the Daleks when their guns temporarily did not work. And Pertwee said, so Daleks without the power to kill, how does it feel? And that's basically what happens here with Eccleston and this one particular Dalek. And they have this brilliantly written and acted scene together about, their long battle between each other, the Doctor versus the Daleks. And it's really well written, really well played by Eccleston. And I guess we also got to give credit to Nicholas Briggs, who does the voice of the Dalek, and he's been doing the voices of the Daleks ever since. And, he brings a lot of character to this one particular Dalek who's being held against its will and is being tortured. And even though we only hear his voice, his electronically altered voice, I think it's a brilliant vocal performance from Nicholas Briggs here. And again, both of these guys are working with a terrific script. And I just love that confrontation scene between the Doctor and the Dalek. And the Doctor wants to have the Dalek killed initially because he says, why should I show you any sympathy? You never showed me any. Very powerful. But it's through the Doctor that Von Stratten learns that, number one, the creature is called a Dalek, and number two, that it can actually speak. And Von Stratten, he's just a douchebag. He's just this total jerk, and just in over his head because he has all this money and all this power, and he wants to use the Dalek for totally the wrong reasons. And of course, the Dalek. Oh, it also has to be said that the Doctor himself, because Von Straten also finds out, obviously through the Doctor's confrontation with the Dalek, that the Doctor is also an alien. So he wants to examine the Doctor against the Doctor's will. So we see the Doctor. I mean, Eccleston. He's got his shirt off and he's tied up or chained up. And Von Straten discovers that yes, that the Doctor is an alien. That the Doctor has two hearts. So now he has two aliens. But the Doctor's trying to warn Van Straten, and he's telling him, that Dalek is dangerous. It knows I'm here. It's going to get out, and the Dalek eventually finds a way to escape. And then the reason that it escapes, how it escapes, is that the Doctor's companion Rose, who's been watching this whole thing, she actually takes pity on the Dalek. Because she knows that this Dalek is being tortured, so she wants to speak to the Dalek to try to comfort it, and it seems to work initially. The Dalek actually seems to appreciate Rose trying to comfort it, but then Rose makes the mistake of touching the Dalek. I mean, she's trying to comfort the Dalek. She touches the Dalek, and by touching the Dalek absorbs her DNA. Although you got to wonder how that can be, because the Dalek has this metallic shell around it. It's a little blob creature with a single eye encased inside a metal frame. But never mind. Anyway, by touching the Dalek somehow manages to absorb her DNA, and it gains power and it breaks free. But now it's absorbed Rose's human DNA as well. So it is mentally and emotionally conflicted. But we also get to see, once the Dalek escapes, that it is even more powerful. I mean, much more powerful than the Daleks of the past have ever been. Obviously, bullets have no effect on it. It now has a force field. It can have a force field around it. It's not the first time that we've seen a Dalek levitate. People forget a little too easily that in the Sylvester McCoy story, Remembrance of the Daleks, that was the very first time we saw the Dalek finally be able to levitate. So that old thing about, if you want to escape from a Dalek, all you have to do is just run up a flight of stairs, that no longer applies. Okay, the Daleks can fly now. They can levitate. But we do see the Dalek in this story levitate and go up the stairs and threaten Rose and the supporting characters around her, so the soldiers who are in the bunker. We're also introduced to a guy named Adam, played by Bruno Langley, and he becomes a very, very limited companion. He will travel with the Doctor and Rose for one more story, and then the Doctor gives him the boot, which we'll talk about next time. But we meet him. I mean, I like him. I mean, I think he's a good character. I'm ashamed that he basically fucks up with the Doctor in the next story, and the Doctor gives him the boot. But for this initial story where we meet Adam, I think he's a good supporting character. I guess he works in the bunker with Von Straten, and he lends good support to the Doctor and Rose here. But anyway, yeah, the Dalek breaks loose. It's still mentally and emotionally tortured. It starts massacring all the soldiers in the bunker. The soldiers' bullets have no effect on it whatsoever. And it also looks at one point that Rose's life is threatened by the Dalek. Rose tries to run away from the Dalek along with Adam, but she doesn't run as fast as Adam does, and the door comes down. Adam gets through the door, but Rose doesn't make it through the door. So it looks like Rose is trapped by the Dalek and is about to be killed by the Dalek, but the Dalek spares her life, because I guess the Dalek recognizes that Rose was kind to it. So the Dalek does not kill Rose. But eventually this leads to a confrontation between the Dalek and Von Straten and the Doctor. The Dalek manages to escape again. Don't quite remember how, but it manages to escape again. The Doctor decides to kill the Dalek, and he gets this big, huge gun, huge mother of a gun, to take the Dalek out with. But at the crucial moment, Rose convinces the Doctor not to kill the Dalek. I think Rose basically says to the Doctor, if you kill the Dalek, then you're no better than the Dalek. And this is also a point where the Dalek blows a hole through the ceiling, and the sunlight comes through, and this somehow calms the Dalek somewhat. I think Rose mentions to the Doctor, he just wants to see the sun. He just wants to see sunlight for the first time. It's a powerful scene. The Doctor eventually decides not to kill the Dalek, that he can't quite bring himself to actually do it. And it's pretty obvious to everybody that this Dalek is in a tremendous amount of torment, mental and emotional torment, because, again, it has Rose's human DNA inside it, and it can't handle being human. Daleks are not supposed to be human. Daleks are not supposed to have human emotions. They're not supposed to care about anything or anyone. All they know is kill anything that's not a Dalek. If it's not a Dalek, it is the enemy and it must be killed. But now that this Dalek has absorbed Rose's human DNA, it's conflicted and doesn't know what to do. And in the end, it decides it can't handle it. And this very powerful ending happens. Again, this story succeeded in making me care about a Dalek, even though all logic says I shouldn't care about a Dalek. But this one particular Dalek I felt bad for. It tells Rose, order my destruction. I cannot be like you. This is sickness. Obey, obey, obey. Very powerful scene, and Rose realizes, that there's no way to help this Dalek. Nothing can help it. So she tells the Dalek, okay, do it, and she steps back, the Doctor steps back, and the Dalek basically implodes and kills itself. Very, very powerful stuff. Very powerful ending. In the end, Van Straten gets his just desserts. I guess he's led away. He's arrested. And the Doctor and Rose, and they bring Adam with them, even though he will only last for one more story, and they all climb into the TARDIS and go. And that's the end of it. But wow, what a massively powerful story this is. I mean, this is just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal television, not just sci-fi television, but television. I mean, this episode should have won an award of some sort. I think it's really that well done. So phenomenal performances here from Eccleston, Billy Piper. I think the supporting cast are great in this. Like I said, you got Bruno Langley as Adam, Corey Johnson as Van Straten. I also want to make mention of Anna Louise Plowman as Van Straten's assistant, Diana Goddard. Very talented Kiwi actress. Turns out she's from New Zealand. And another interesting note about her, she's married to Toby Stevens, who was the baddie in Die Another Day. Yeah, that's her hubby in real life. But a very attractive woman, and good performance from her as well. So I remember her. The supporting actors who play the soldiers, I guess Jaina Carpenter plays one of the main soldiers. She's the soldier who's with Rose and Adam as the Dalek is coming up the stairs, and the Dalek eventually kills her, but she's good in her supporting role, Jaina Carpenter as the soldier DiMaggio. But I mean, this is just a phenomenal story. I mean, it's so well written and directed. Let's give props to the director here, Joe Ahern, I think is how you pronounce it. The terrific script by Robert Shearman, which gives total respect to Terry Nation and his creations of the Daleks. I know Terry Nation is smiling down on Robert Shearman for this story, totally. And like I said, the fact that this story actually made me feel bad for a Dalek, wow, I mean, that's quite an accomplishment. So this is far and away my favorite Doctor Who story from the Christopher Eccleston era, and I think it's one of the top 10 greatest Doctor Who stories of all time. I love it that much. So obviously I'm giving Dalek an easy 10 out of 10. For me, it's Christopher Eccleston's best story. I totally love it, and all hail Dalek.
Excellent.
Yeah. All hail Dalek, not the Daleks. That'd be good.
Yeah. Well, cheers for that, Al. And we'll hand over to Ollie. Your thoughts on Dalek. I am Henry Van Straten.
This is a fantastic story. We will give it a good review. And that's true. Dalek is phenomenal. Fantastic. Again, I'm saying fantastic, but I really mean it this time. Fantastic story. This is a fabulous story for Christopher Eccleston. Definitely one of his best. For me, I actually think his last one is the best, but this is a close second. This is a really good, dramatic story. There's not many comedic scenes in this one. It's all pretty much played straight. Certainly after the last story. Eccleston is on top form here, and he delivers the performance of a lifetime, as the Doctor, especially when he gets pretty dark. Several moments, like when he's talking to the Dalek and then he's torturing it, and then he's like, "Why don't you rid the world of your filth? Why don't you just die? You would make a good Dalek." There's several moments, and then obviously, of course, the finale where he is about to shoot the Dalek, and then Rose says to him, "Look at you, Doctor. What are you changing into?" So yeah, it's an interesting character piece for the Doctor as well, because he is clearly still trying to get over the fact that he lost all his people, and he doesn't really want to kill it, but he's so driven by his hatred. That's what he's doing, and Rose is the sort of voice of reason for him. So I kind of like that aspect of the story. The Dalek itself is a great character, and Nicholas Briggs should be commended for the voice. The finale where the Dalek kills itself is really powerful. You actually do feel sympathy for a Dalek for the first time ever, and I think it was a great angle to play the story from. And Rose touching it kind of gave it some kind of human emotion, which I think is a clever idea. I think it's a very, very good script. The rest of the cast do a good job as well. The guy that plays Henry Van Statten is great, and the actress that plays Goddard, she's good. I mean, they do good American accents. I assume that the guy playing Van Statten is American. I mean, I don't quite know, but they're good nonetheless. There's a lot of great action in this story, particularly when they...
sorry to interrupt. Yeah, the actor who does play Van Statten is American. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks. I didn't know that. But yeah, no, the action stuff is all good as well. Like, especially when the Dalek is levitating, that's kind of fun. And yeah, it's not a story that I think should be the beginning of the show for people to watch. If you're a young kid, it's quite dark. I think it's one of the darker stories, but it works well for Christopher Eccleston's Doctor, and you can see the lengths he is pushed to. And the fact that he laughs at the Dalek when he sees that his trigger's not working, that just kind of, in a way, the Doctor is kind of framed as a bit of a villain in this one. But it's all about perspective. You can understand the perspective of both the Dalek and the Doctor and how similar they are. And again, just incredible writing for this one. And also there's a nice reference to the Cybermen with the Cyberman's head in the museum. That's kind of nice. And Murray Gold's soundtrack is also very good. As for Adam, I mean, he's okay. He's not really a character I care about that much, to be honest. He's kind of more prominent in the next story, so I'll wait till the next story before we properly talk about him. But yeah, he's an okay character. But I mean, I understand why they wrote him in there, to show that the Doctor does not take everyone. Again, that's going to be further explored in the next story. But yeah, I think Adam's he's a pretty decent character in this one. So yeah, it's got everything really. It's got emotion, it's got drama, it's got conflict, it's got action. This is the perfect 45 minutes. I have no flaws with this story. An easy 10 out of 10 from this story. So yeah, I'll pass the microphone back to Jack on this one.
Yeah, Dalek. Well, what a fantastic episode. Fantastic, as Christopher Eccleston would say. Yeah, I mean, I just have to echo the sentiments of Ollie and Alan. I think it's a terrific Doctor Who story. I think undeniably it's a great Doctor Who story. I wouldn't quite say it's in my top 10 Doctor Who stories of all time, but it is one of the best stories of the new series. I think it really is a great story. And what's great about it is it brought back the Daleks for a new generation. Like I said, the young kids who are watching this story who never heard of Doctor Who, the Daleks before, who started watching with Rose or whatever. And this might be some people's first Doctor Who story that they saw. Dalek might have been the first one that they watched, and it's a great story. It's a great return for the Daleks because the last time we saw them was Remembrance of the Daleks in the start of McCoy's second season. That was the 25th anniversary season, and now we have them back on screen after a 17-year absence. And I think it's great. I mean, initially when they were making series one, apparently they were worried that they might not be able to get the Daleks because of the Terry Nation estate. But thankfully, they managed to get them for this story. And Robert Shearman, he just does a really great job with the script. I mean, he had written a Big Finish story with Colin Baker called Jubilee, and that is kind of similar to Dalek. But saying that, I think Dalek is just a very it's just a great piece of television because it really focuses in on the Doctor's hatred for the Daleks. It really focuses in on, his, relationship with them because even though the Doctor's a good person at heart and he always tries to do the best thing and he's always trying to save people, when it comes to the Daleks, he just can't stand them, not just because of the past, but also because the Daleks destroyed his home world. The Daleks, the Time Wars, they were involved in the Time War, and both of them were wiped out. And he's the last of his race, and he thought the Daleks were gone. And I really like the start of the story where you have Henry Van Staten, and you got another reference, Bad Wolf 1 descending, Bad Wolf 1 descending. And yeah, the actor who plays Henry Van Staten, very good. I mean, there's that funny moment where he's talking to the woman at the start, and he says, "What are you, a Republican or Democrat?" And she says, "Democrat." And he's like, "Why?" He's like, "Because they're just so funny, sir." And he's like, "Oh, I like her." And yeah, the character Henry Van Staten, he's just this rich arsehole. I mean, it's set actually. I mean, funnily enough, now it's set in the past, but then it was set in the future. It's set in 2012, and you begin with the Doctor and Rose, and he's in an alien exhibit, and he sees the head of a Cyberman from Revenge of the Cybermen, and I like that bit where he says, she says, "Oh, who is it?" He's like, "An old friend or an old enemy." And it's interesting. The Ninth Doctor, he never meets the Cybermen, but Eccleston's Doctor does meet the Cybermen in the next series. But there's some interesting stuff there. We see that he touches the glass case and it sends off this alert, and he's taken away. And it's interesting to see the Dalek in the story, how it's the last Dalek of its kind, and it's being tortured by Henry Van Staten, and it won't say anything. And he's talking to the Doctor, and he says, "I call it the Metaltron," and we see that he sends a doctor in because the doctor says that he can talk to this creature and see what it is. And I just love that moment that Alan was talking about. There's that scene where he's with Rose and he's with Henry Van Staten, and he has this thing that turns out to be a musical instrument, and then he throws it away. And I do like that line from Rose where Henry Van Staten is, shouting at the doctor, and Rose says, "Oh, blimey, you can smell the testosterone." It's quite funny. And then we see that Adam is there, and there's a funny line where Henry Van Staten says, he's like, "Oh, you go with the Adam, you go with the British girl, go and canoodle her spoon or whatever it is you British do." That made me laugh. And it's interesting because there's definitely like a rivalry there. The Doctor just thinks Van Staten's an idiot, and Van Staten is just this rich, self-important arsehole. And we see that the Doctor, he goes into the cage and he starts talking to the creature, and he says, "I'm here to help," and then it says, "Doctor, impossible, the Doctor, exterminate, exterminate." And it's just a great scene. Eccleston's acting there is great, where he says, let me out. And then the Dalek can't fire, and he's like, oh, fantastic. Oh, fantastic. And he says, oh, how does it feel? The great space dustbin, how does it feel? And then, the Dalek says, keep back. And he says, oh, what for? What are you going to do to me? If you can't kill, then what are you good for, eh, Dalek? What's the point of you? And then we see that the Dalek explains that it fought in a time war. And the Doctor says, but your race is dead. He's like, the entire Dalek ship. No, no, no. He basically says, oh, your race is dead. And the Dalek says, this is impossible. And he says, I was there. I saw it happen. I made it happen. And he says, 10 million ships on fire. The entire Dalek fleet wiped out in 1 second. And then the Dalek says, oh, you destroyed us. And Eccleston's acting there is just really powerful. Like that bit afterwards where he just walks towards the camera. And, the Dalek says the coward survived. And he says, oh, when I got your message, poor little thing. And he says, well, there's no one else coming because there's no one else left. And then he says, oh, I know what you need. I know what you deserve. Exterminate. And he electrocutes the Dalek. And it says, oh, mercy. And he's like, oh, why? Why should I? You never did. And you could really see the hatred, the absolute hatred that the Doctor has against the Daleks. And I think that works really well in the story because, it's turned on its head. The Doctor is kind of, like Ollie said, he's kind of the villain in this story. I mean, the villain is the Dalek, but it's also the Doctor because he has such a hatred of the Daleks. He doesn't care if it's the last Dalek in the universe. He's going to wipe it out from existence. And the bit afterwards, great, where the Doctor's taken away and Henry Van Staten says, oh, no, I know your name, Dalek. Speak to me, Dalek. And then the Dalek, it doesn't respond. And then he gets his minion to torture it. And I like the bit afterwards where the minion says, oh, what are you going to do? Sucker me to death? And then that's literally what happens. That's a great moment. And I like all the stuff with the Doctor and Van Staten, where the Doctor saying, no, you got to kill it. You got to kill it. It's a Dalek. And I like that scene where he's in the lift and he explains about the Daleks. And he says, oh, but Doctor, you're an alien as well, aren't you? And he says, oh, who created the Daleks? And then Eccleston's Doctor, the Ninth Doctor, says, oh, by a man who's a king of his own little world. You would like him, Henry Van Staten. And it's a nice reference to Davros. And then we see afterwards that the Doctor, they take off his shirt and they chain him up and they perform an X-ray on him and they find out that he's got 2 hearts. And I just think Henry Van Staten, he's just the ultimate slime ball. He's a real piece of shit. And I like all the stuff with Rose in the story, how she sort of takes, sympathy on the Daleks. She doesn't realize that the Daleks are these monsters, these killing machines, because the Doctor's never explained that to Rose. And the character of Adam, it's kind of interesting in this story because he was always meant to be a character that would only last one story and then he would leave. And that's how Russell wrote him. He was one of the very few companions that just didn't work out for the Doctor, and that's why he leaves in the next story. Pardon me. Pardon me for yawning, but he's an interesting character, and the actor who plays him, he's probably most famous for being in Coronation Street. But nonetheless, I think he's interesting as Adam in this, that we find out that he's working for Van Staten and he's got all these alien weapons and stuff like that. And we see that Rose, she touches the Dalek at one point, and we see that that regenerates the Dalek. Literally, the Dalek manages to break free of its bonds. It fully repairs itself. It gets out of its containment cell. And we see that it starts causing all this havoc. We see that it goes around and it starts killing everybody in the base. And there's that great moment where we see the soldier starts shooting at the Dalek, and the Dalek has this force field. And we see the Dalek just turns around and starts killing everybody. And this episode has a high body count. And what I really like about this is that the Daleks are a real threat. Even though you've only got one Dalek in this story, it's a real threat because this one Dalek manages to kill off almost the entire base of humans with guns and all of that. And I think that's great. And there's some powerful moments in this. Like I love the bit afterwards where we see that the military men they encounter the Dalek and they start shooting at it. Oh, we should. Sorry, and we see that the sprinklers start to go off, and the doctor is talking to the Dalek, and he says, "Do give yourself one final mission? Wipe out the Daleks. Why don't you just die?" And you see Eccleston, he's so into that scene that you actually see the spit, coming out of his mouth, and I love the bit afterwards where the Dalek says, "You would make a good Dalek." That's a great moment, and we see that the Daleks really conflicted. At one point, it's going to kill Rose, and we see that Rose can't make it in time to the door, and we hear the gunshot, and the Doctor thinks that Rose is dead, and that's a great moment. And I love the bit afterwards where Van Staten says, "I'm sorry," and the Doctor gives him a lecture, and he says, "This is your fault. You cared more about this creature and your own vanity project than you did about the lives of the people on the base." And that's a great moment. And I love the bit afterwards with the Dalek. Turns out it didn't kill Rose. And because Rose touched it, it also absorbed a little bit of humanity as well, which I thought was really interesting. And we do see the Daleks elevate. A lot of people think that this is where this is the first story where you see them hover. But I mean, that's not actually the case. The first time we saw them hover was in members of the Daleks here. They say elevate, and they go off, and we see that it goes up the stairs. But yeah, I mean, there's some great stuff there, and I think the ending of the story is just really fantastic, where we see that the Dalek it's about to kill Henry Van Staten, and then it can't do it, and the Dalek is saying to Rose, "What am I? What am I?" And then we see that the Dalek, it's with Rose, and it just wants to, see the sunlight, and you see inside the Dalek and the Dalek mutant, which is really cool. And we see the Doctor, he's just having none of it. We see at one point that he gets this giant gun from the armory, and he's talking to Adam, and he gets one of these guns. And I love the ending of the story where Rose is with the Dalek, and the Dalek, like I said, it opens up its shell, and it's it wants to touch the light, and it's changing. It's evolving and becoming more human. Like it absorbed a bit of humanity when Rose touched it, and I love that bit with the Doctor where he's pointing the gun, and he's pointing at the Dalek, and he says, "Rose, out of the way, out of the way," and she says, "Oh no, Doctor, I'm not going to let you kill it. And what about you, Doctor? What are you changing into?" And I love that bit. I love that bit afterwards where Eccleston, as the Doctor, says, "Oh, I couldn't, I wasn't." And then he says, "Oh, Rose, but none of them are left. The Time Lords, the Daleks are gone." And Eccleston's acting there is great because the Doctor becomes the thing that he hates. The fact that he's willing to kill the Daleks forever, he's becoming the very thing that he hates, which is a Dalek. And the Daleks just kill everything, and he's sort of, he's sort of like that in his hatred of the Daleks. And then we see that the Dalek, it just can't take it anymore, and it kills itself. And it's interesting that those spheres on the Dalek, like before, it was never explained what they were, but we see that they detach themselves, and it blows itself up, it self-destructs itself, which I think is a great moment. I really love that. And the ending of the story, I think, is great, where you see that Van Staten is taken away, and she takes his place, Van Staten's assistant. I think that's really good, really good. And she says, "So, wipe his memory and dump him on a street like Seattle, or something like that, or Michigan, something like that, or Minnesota." That was very funny. And yeah, as a Doctor Who story, it's a classic. It's definitely one of the best stories of Eccleston's era of the new series. I really have no flaws with it. I think the Daleks are fantastic in this, even though we only have one Dalek. I think it's great. I think Nicholas Briggs gives a fantastic performance as the Dalek in this. I think I really like the setting. The actor who plays Henry Van Staten. It's all great. Billy Piper's very good in this as well. The soundtrack. It's a phenomenal Doctor Who story, and yeah, for 45 minutes, it just flies by. I mean, that's the thing that will become the standard format from now on in new series is 145-minute or 2 45-minute episodes. Something that they tried out in Colin Baker's first season and it didn't really work out. But for here, it works. It works really well. And as a piece of television, I mean, nearly 20 years later, I mean, this came out 2005. Here we are in 2022, nearly 20 years later, and it still holds up phenomenally well. I mean, it's a great Doctor Who story. It's a great return for the Daleks as well. I mean, I suppose my only complaint would be like you know, Aliens of London World War Three. They kind of gave away that the Daleks are returning in the next episode and the next time trailer, and maybe they should have called it something else instead of Daleks. So when we saw the Dalek in this story, it really was a surprise and it was a shock. But I mean, that's a minor nitpick because I think it's great. Robert Shearman did a great job. The direction here by Joe Ahern, he's actually an Irish director and he would go on to direct a lot of stories in Series 1. It's a real shame they never brought him back after Doctor Who Series 1, Joe Ahern, because he's a great Irish director and he did a very good job with this story and a lot of the stories in Series 1. He also directed the finale. So, yeah, it's a great story. We're halfway through Series 1 now, and it's definitely one of the best of Eccleston's era. I'd say it's number 2 in his era for me, and I'll close off by giving it, an easy 10 out of 10. So, that's really it for part 1 of Series 1. I mean, we decided to do this reflection in 2 halves because I mean, there's 10 stories in Series 1, and if we did all 10 episodes in one, we'd probably be here for like 5 or 6 hours. But yeah, I mean, we're not going to do a ranking as well because just talking about the first half, we'll do a ranking of all 10 stories in part 2. But is there anything you want to say, Ollie or Alan, before we close off?
No, other than this stream was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And you know what? So were you two.
It's great to be talking about Doctor Who again, and what a wonderful way for Doctor Who to come back. I mean, Doctor Who really did come roaring back to life with Christopher Eccleston as the Doctor and with Russell T Davies in the producer's chair. Doctor Who is back, baby. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And we're back. And so I mean, that's all we really have for now, guys. We'll see you all next time when we reflect on the second half of Series 1 and we'll do a ranking of all 10 episodes. So until then, see ya.
Goodbye.
Bye.